Hey guys, Tarke here, and today, before we get started for Baeclast, just a small teeny-weeny announcement, nothing that important. We're going to be interviewing Chris during the week, so look forward to that. Raiz, what have you been up to?
I've been doing the gaming re-rolling, not as much as last week, but a little bit. I do have an Exsanguinate Trapper now. You know, I did see it initially from you, Tarke. It was very poggers. Yeah, I did go crit, however, and I like the crit. I have 2 cold iron points now. The character is like 92, and I'm starting to do real content, but my god, I've been just itching for a reroll. I don't know. I wanted to play Reaper again, but then Steel rolled it, and now I can't play it because Steel's playing it, and that's just weird. And I don't know. I'm conflicted. And all this time, also, I've been looking for well, I'm spacing out on the name. Vixen's Gloves, Vixen's Entrapment to make an Impending Doom Decay character. Which, yeah, I don't know. I can't get the gloves. I found all the other difficult to find shit for the build, and then I can't get the gloves, like Soul Strike and Dream Fragments and all sorts of wacky stuff. I got it, and I don't have the Vixens that are supposed to be coming. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
You been Gwen gambling?
You know, I've made a character and I leveled it to 36, which is the minimum requirement, and in 15 rerolls, I only got 1 pair of the base gloves. In which case, I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is going to work. And then GGG released a patch that increases the chance of getting them. But I've been getting the same result in terms of getting the base on like a high-level character, the same as the low-level one. It's just like every 15 rerolls I get the base. And so far, no luck, no.
So it feels bad, man. What about you, Nuggy? What have you been up to?
All right, I'm like stretching. Okay. Right. Wait. Hold on. So where was I at last time? So I was on Blade Trap, right? Yeah.
You hadn't started Blade Trap yet. You were about to start it, I think. Oh no, you had, because you were talking about the MTX.
I had. Yeah. The day after, I ran into what's the guy called? The ice guy. It's one of the new bosses. Uhtred. I ran into Uhtred, and then my Blade Trapper was no longer.
Did it go dead?
I did. It did, yes. So but that was a fun fight. Oh yeah. My god, that's a good fight. That is, I think that's the best League fight I have experienced in I don't know how long. It felt fair and hard. And it's like, it just felt nice.
The only complaint I have with the Uhtred fight is the little homing fireball things that he fires are very hard to see if you have any sort of
They scared me so much. They actually made me like play very differently. And I think it's sort of like, they nearly killed me the first, because they were hidden behind his minions. So they were very difficult to see.
They had sort of a silvery outline. I think they have something of a silvery outline, but it's just not very visible. If that were just a bit brighter, Uhtred would be like a perfect boss in my mind, because everything else that he does is, you know, dangerous enough that you have to think about it, but not bullshit. Everything is really well telegraphed. He's got an incredible aesthetic that's, you know, really consistent throughout the whole fight as well. He's like so close to being perfect. He's like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even with a little bit of a visual clarity, I mean that it is what it is. I wouldn't subtract too much from it. I think it was just yeah. But moving on from the boss fight, which is great. So I mean, this is a reason why people should, you know, try and get their logbooks if possible. Next build was Exsanguinate Poison Seismic Trap.
Okay.
Yes, I think that was the next one I did, wasn't it? Yeah. Hold on, chat. Was there something in between? I'm juggling a lot of builds. Let's just say that was the next one. I think that might have been
or Pathfinder?
Saboteur.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know. I think the Poison Shearcross was before the other Trapper. But yeah, okay. Moving on. The Sab, very good build. The fact I made it full dot so I could take advantage of Onslaught and what's it called? The other thing called
Hired Killer? Recovery on Kill?
Elusive?
Elusive on kill. Yeah, so I basically had like on kill mechanics up all the time. I was super speedy. Right, so I was just like, I was zooming everywhere. It was a really good build. Until I ran into someone who was faster. That was unfortunate. Yeah.
How did you die on that build? I can't quite remember. I remember seeing it and it looked really nice.
Right. I kind of like ran in front of him. I've actually never died to that. I've only been hit by that attack like once or twice in the entirety of me playing PoE. And then I'm playing a trapper that doesn't even need to be near him, and I run in front of him for no reason. I'm like, what am I doing?
Did he say the line? I'm faster.
Oh, he did say the line.
I get it now. Yeah.
It's the because I don't think you specifically mentioned it. It's the big slam that he does when he's in his melee form, right?
Yep. Well, it's like he does it as the last thing he does before the snake spawn. And so I was being a little greedy, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to go on the other side and get the good positioning. I was like, nah, I'm just going to die instead. Great. So that was awesome.
It wasn't even a slam, it was like the projectile thing, right?
It's like his big swipe that does like, it's... Oh, hold on. Actually, go on to another one. My food is here. Sorry.
What about you? What about you, Ziggy?
Whole planning. I love that story from Nugi about dying to Hell Has Been and how he framed that. So good.
Yeah.
Cracks me up. I told myself before doing this marathon that I won't reroll. I'll stick with one build because it'll be much more efficient. I'll waste a lot of time to rerolling. I'm spilling my tea everywhere.
I saw that was very good.
But then I got to thinking one night, I was like, maybe there's a better build out there that it'll be worth the time to reroll. Maybe I can get it up and running by throwing a bunch of cash at it quickly enough that I can get back into the swing of things. So I rerolled. I spent like, a good chunk of a day leveling, getting up in endgame, gearing up. It takes a lot of time to gear a new character if you just like speed it to endgame and then like buy a full set of endgame gear. It takes like quite a few hours to just like buy everything because you're like, yeah, okay, I got all my gear slots, and you're like, oh, now I gotta get all the jewels, now I gotta get all the gems, I gotta get all that stuff. But I got Dark Pact, Gazi's Dark Pact set up running, so Skeleton self-cast Dark Pact. And that was a very cool build, and I got so I had like life gain on hit, energy shield gain on hit, life leech, energy shield leech, hybrid petrified blood, freaking all this stuff going. And I was like, there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in this build. But I put maybe 10 plus-ish exalts into it, and I was like, this is going to hurt my hand. It was a higher effort build than my previous build, Scourgear, and I was like, if I'm going to be re-rolling something, I should probably be re-rolling.
Yeah, I'm surprised why you picked that. Like, that seems a very odd choice.
In hindsight, I might not have been functioning quite peak performance at that moment when I made that decision, but it is a very cool build, and if I was playing a build just for fun purposes or to just push a build and not trying to get a mirror, I probably would have stuck with it. Because it is a super, like, big brain build. Very clever. I like a lot about it. But yeah, I decided to roll that character into a Spectre Summoner. I was like, oh yeah, okay, let's do some Spectres. That's pretty low stress. So I swapped over to Syndicate Spectres, and I chucked about 10 exalts at it and ended up with about 20 exalts worth of gear because I had a very fortuitous chest craft. I got a Delve Spectre chest for an extra Spectre and re-rolled the suffixes and 6-linked it in like 180 fusings and everything like that. So that ended up being like a 10 exalt chest. And then I was rolling for a while, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. This is really comfortable and smooth. I can definitely see vibing with this. And then I like started getting into tier 14 maps, and I was just like super unimpressed with the performance for that level of investment. I was like, they were slowly chewing away at bosses. Clearing regular stuff was fine, but clearing excavations was omega slow. And I'm like, they're just getting stuck on the shield mobs, and I'm running out of flasks. And I'm like, oh god, is this what everyone's Path of Exile experience is? Is non-Pathfinder right now? So I was just like, I'm just going to swap over to my other character, my Scourgear character once again, just to run some excavations. And I was like, you know what? There's no place like home. So I thought the grass was green on the other side of the fence, but I Dorothy'd my way back to my Scourge build. And that's where I'm at the moment. I'm Scourge farming.
And in terms of mirror progress, if you had to put a percentage or your very fun 3.9 out of 27.
I'm at 5.1 out of 9 locked in cards. I had a big 2 days on my Scourge build yesterday and today, and made some excellent progress. Excavation's been paying out, but also some good mapping and bossing. I've like kind of set aside some of my like fears about pushing harder stuff, and I'm like, wow, I can do a lot more than I think I can. So I was like running Uber Elder and stuff, really comfortably, no like deathless smooth Uber Elder, and got a 6.5 Exalt Jewel. So that got a nice big chunk of progress. So I'm probably like 65% of the way there now.
That's cool. What is the price of a mirror, like in like Exalts or something? Just to put it into context.
I get updates from Draco like every day. He does like triple updates every day. He's like, in the last 24 hours, Ziggy's made this many chaos, and at the mirror price of this, it's gonna take him 90 days to complete a mirror. And then the recent update was like I hit under 2 days on one of the updates with a spike in wealth, but that's all time high. But I think it's like they're about 150 exalts, which is like 1,400 chaos. No, actually, it's a bit more now. It's like 1,500, 15,000 chaos. Oh my god, math! It's too early for math. It's like 15,000 chaos, 150 exalts.
It's pretty cool. What about you, Octavian? What are you doing at the moment?
I am still playing the same Trapper that I mentioned at the last Baeclast. I think I was like just getting started with it on the last Baeclast, so I've made a lot of progress. Just hit level 97 with it. I've done a whole bunch of bosses, but there's a few I still haven't done. Haven't done Uber Elder, haven't done Maven yet. I want to get those down. Probably just going to do the one Maven and then not fight her again. I'm not a big fan of the Maven fight, but that's not really too relevant to my build. Yeah, alternate elements are really, really strong. The character has come together super well. 15% base crit is good, it turns out. When I have my elements on enemies, I go from having about 40% crit chance to 100% crit chance. And that's like all just from investment into elements. So Diamond Flask be damned. I am planning some more characters. I have a couple that I want to go for. I have a sweep build that I want to play, which is going to be a Void Forged sweep champion or Slayer. I haven't decided between champ or Slayer. And that's also going to be with Secrets of Suffering, because alternate ailments are very good.
Yeah, do it. I love it.
You're going to be stuck on it forever now. It's just one of those things that you get used to and never can get rid of.
I don't know. It's one of the things that they buffed, one of the few things they buffed going into this league, and yeah, it turned out to be really, really powerful. There was another build, but I'd have to open my path building because I'm not remembering it off the top of my head. The problem with the sweep build is that I think there's like one Void Forge on Hardcore Trade and only a handful of the cards. And there's also no sweep helmet enchants. And the sweep helmet enchant is a chance to gain an endurance charge on hit. So it's like actually really big. So yeah, might have to farm those myself.
Oof. Fun.
I mean, farming, like if you were to just be like, I'm just going to farm a helm enchant for a couple of days, you'd get a few cool things. But if you were to go, I am getting that one enchant, then yeah, you're probably going to.
Yeah. No, I mean, I need a helm enchant on my Trapper as well, and I need the pen boot enchant still. So, like, there's a lot of stuff pulling me towards lab. I just continually try to forget that there's a lot of stuff pulling me towards lab because I don't really want to run it. But it's probably a good idea to go and run it.
That's fair.
You just want to heist forever. Be honest.
I'd say my experience has been somewhere in the middle ground of Ziggy and Raiz. So at the end of the last podcast, I was pretty much like, I'm going to get Cirrus down on my Exsanguinate Trapper, and then I'm going to play something new, experiment with some of the new stuff, kind of see where things are at. Got Cirrus down, got a perfect medium Cluster Jewel, Thread of Hope, sorry. Perfect medium Thread of Hope, which is really nice in Duelist. You can grab all the charge stuff. And he dropped a bunch of Hunter Influence again. I'm like, oh, sick, I'll try out Caustic Arrow. And I get to do the new Pathfinder stuff, we lit. And I was having a lot of fun. I got it to maps. I ran one map, and I'm like, my Trapper was better. And then I went back on my Trapper for a bit, and then I'm like, no, I want to play a new build. And I stared at Path of Building for like 6 hours or something. And I had a Snake Pit ring drop for me, so I thought, oh, I can do Orb of Winter. That's really cool. And I leveled that up. For whatever reason, when I got Unleash, and I put Unleash on Eye of Winter, I was like, I no longer want to play this skill. Like, I was enjoying it, and I put Unleash on it. I'm like, no, I don't want to play this anymore. I don't know why. I thought I would have thought that Unleash would have made me enjoy it more, but like I put Unleash on, and I'm like, no, this is lame. So I went back on my Exanuate Trapper, did that for a couple more days, went back to Path of Building for like 2 days. Then I made a pure Exanuate Trapper, no, just a pure self-cast Exanuate build, and thought, let's see what that feels like, because it should have had like triple the damage of my Trapper. And my idea was to go Trickster. And instead of doing what most people do, where they do the whole like acro, phase acro, wind dancer thing, and they shove a cluster jewel there, if you actually go like hybrid and you kind of loop around the left and route through the ES to all the nodes, you end up with the most damage you can get without cluster jewels and something like 12k EHP, because you've got like 7k life and like 5k ES. I'm like, oh, this would be sick. And then I've run like 3 maps on it, and I'm like, my Trapper was better. So I think what I'm gonna do is I think I'm just gonna go back onto my Pathfinder and just mess around with that. Maybe do some like poison spectral helix or like poison scourge arrow stuff, but in SSF, so it might be a bit jank. But
I was talking to someone about poison spectral helix yesterday, and it seems to cover a lot of the problems that spectral helix has with clear, because you get the poison prolate from Pathfinder.
Yeah.
And Pathfinder's so sexy this patch. And it sounded like actually really big boss damage too. They were like, I've got 20 million boss damage. I'm like, that's better than me, you bastard.
I mean, to be fair, when people say they can be like, I'm playing Viper Strike. I have 500 million boss damage. And it's like, well, how long did it take you to get to that?
I'm more inclined to believe it with this one, but yeah. You can certainly inflate things a bit.
But no, Spectral Helix is just a nutty skill just because of the damage scaling on it. That was one thing I found quite funny. I've spent a surprising amount of time on Reddit recently, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But there was a guy in there who was trying to be like, my build's really good, and I'm playing totally off meta. I'm Void Forge, Spectral Helix. And it's like, bruh, like, you're playing one of the most damaging skills ever with a decent weapon. I'm pretty sure your build isn't that off meta. But anyway. Have anyone been spending much time with Royale? Because I know that Raiz and
Wait,
Niggy...
what about I finish my...
Well, I thought I was going to give you more time to eat your food. I was going to be...
No, I'm done.
Okay, Nuggy, finish.
Yeah, I was
Tell
fast.
us about your deaths.
No, okay, yeah, so I got caught by the guy. Yeah, it's like, he got me. But then I re-rolled. And my re-roll was... Divine Ire.
Ooh, nice.
Cool.
On a Raider.
Yeah. On a Raider.
Yeah, so I had lying around Impulsor, another one, and Storm's Gift. And the thing about Divine Ire is that it doesn't really clear well without a secondary mechanic, right? You need to have like Prolift or explosions. So the cast speed is really nice. Since you're standing still a lot, the evasion and the dodge is really important. So it fits really well into that build. I'm on a 5-link. I've recently rerolled into something else, but I'll tell you that in a moment. So I ended up before that reroll, and I've been really enjoying it. So it's been really weird. But I'm on a 5-link. I'm like 19 gems. I am comfortably doing T11s. I'm starting to like hit a little bit of a I really need to upgrade a few things. I got a shield that might increase my damage if I hit the suffix to prefix or prefix to suffix. That'll increase my damage by 20%, and that should net me with gem levels. I should be able to do like all red maps comfortably. So that's actually looking pretty good. I'm going normal MOM.
Yeah.
No like Archmage or anything, just MOM. So I'll have like around a 9k HP pool on that build on the Raider with like all the dodge and everything. So it's just like really nice and comfy. And since potions you're not giving up as much as running a mana potion anymore, because like they're just not as strong. So it feels better just having that normal mana potion. And then I'm going Supreme Ego with Wrath. with like full lightning damage right now. I'm trying to see if I can like get max shocks on everything. So far, at least up to mid tier 12s, as long as they don't have like double defensive mods, I can actually get 50% shocks.
That's cool.
So that's kind of cool, but it's hard to get chance to shock. That's like the main issue I have right now. I just don't have enough chance to shock.
Blade, right?
Yeah. Like man, like the explosions are sick because of all that lightning scaling I have and element scaling and all that. Yeah. No, very, very fun build. Definitely like a lot of gearing to like really take it further. And I mean, Divine Eye is one of those skills that have like super potential for damage if you're like Trickster and stuff. So it's like it's probably scaled accordingly. So it's like, yeah, you need to be you definitely need to gear for it because it's like fist scaling. But on to the next build. Because what I found while farming with this thing was I found the meat grinder. The unique meat grinder. And what is that? Brain Rattler.
Brain Rattler.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Rattles Cage. That's the wrong one. Wrong game.
Okay. Now this is a spicy one. I am an Inquisitor. Battle Mage. Static Strike. Seismic Trap.
Oh, yeah. This is like one of those South Park memes at the start of the league.
Yes, because duration scaling, we're going full crit. We're gonna have like, we're gonna get close to like crit cap without diamond or whatever, and it just everything scales. Like I can actually run around and kill things since every time you flame dash, you get the 10% more attack damage.
Yeah,
and it does enough damage so I can just clear with it. Any rare that causes any problem, I just throw a trap on them, and the trap is gonna do sick damage because the battle mage of what's it called?
You're getting a lot of damage off that, aren't you?
Is nuts. And I'm gonna full shock everything because 300% more damage. Like when that seismic trap goes off, it's gonna be 50% shocks, and it's gonna be really fun.
I dig it. Sounds cool.
The main problem is attack speed. Like it's really scary, like running around hitting things.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I can see that.
It's super scary. Actually, getting just a static strike to hit anything.
Is the base APS like 1.1 on that weapon? I think
it's pretty. It's 1.25.
Oh, that's a little better than I thought.
A little better. So it'll be with Frenzy charges and onslaught and stuff like that. It'll be okay. It'll be good enough for mapping, I think.
Do you ever remember those old Inquisitor Tripanon builds? I'm kind of getting flashback vibes of that.
I mean, that's okay. Okay. That's a bit extreme, isn't it? That's like 0.9 attack speed.
That build was lit, dude.
I mean...
people who are complaining that PoE's too slow now, play some Tripanon builds. Ellie stacking, Inquis Tripanon, that was the shit back in the day.
But I'm actually hoping to find the jewel so I can get sap on here. Because like if anything, I can just do ailment scaling for the skitter bots and then the sap. So imagine like how much damage reduction you would get.
20%.
Yeah, like you. But 20% with the no. But okay, Brain Rattler has reduced cast speed and reduced movement speed as well.
Okay. Yes.
On enemies we shock.
But you wouldn't shock them.
I will never shock them then.
Yeah, your skitter shocking them wouldn't trigger that.
Maybe I'll just stay without that.
I mean, if you threw a Vol Lightning trap, maybe.
No, I don't think I would.
I don't know why that was so funny, but that was really good.
No, I don't think I will.
Okay.
I mean, 20% is really good. I wasn't trying to underplay it. I'm using it in my build. Like it's
Octavian, your build's really good. Okay, like come on.
So, what was on the topic list?
Before we wanted to, I just want to quickly, if you guys want to talk about Royale, now's your chance. Not ages, because I know a lot of people go, oh, yeah. Royale, baby rage, but go on.
Absolutely. Yeah, we jumped on and had a few more games yesterday and the day before. And I was, originally I was like, oh, I wish they kind of added a cooldown to Whirling Blades and Leap Slam, but I can't argue with results. I like the way the game is shaping up without those skills. So they removed Leap Slam and Whirling Blades entirely. So now it's just Flame Dash Dash. Frostblink, and Shield Charge. I think it would be really good for the game long term if they add a basic dash built into every character and then leave the skill gem drops for movement skills as an upgrade. They could even make it like a longer cooldown, the base dash, and then add the rest of them as like an upgrade. So you have basic dash to get around, and then you can find Frostblink to upgrade it with chilling and make it a little faster, and Flame Dash to upgrade it with burning and whatnot. I think that would be really cool to see. So I'd love to see them experiment with something like that. But yeah, it's we're still seeing like Ellie Hit dominating just because of its really high base damage, even though they slowed it down a little bit. Even despite the removal of Whirling Blades and stuff like that. But it's more in the hands of like a skilled, well-geared player now, rather than just a lot of the time. Since they don't have the mobility advantage anymore, but rather just the kind of up-in-your-face damage. So I've seen a much more diverse playing field. Casting, it's been really fun because we've seen a mixture of all sorts of things. Still seeing some people Divine Eye sniping. We're seeing more cold skills happen. Seen some big like cold skill combos. I saw someone cranking with some Ice Novas on Frostbolts. Bladefall, Reaps having a bit more chance to shine, which is really cool. I think there's still more work to be done, but I'm seeing more and more different builds in the top 10 and some really interesting gameplay happening. And some of the early changes they did was like making it so that a skill gem drops next to everyone on the beach. That's a nice little touch. And a little bit easier to find ramps up into the second area now. So I think that's helped smooth out the early game progression a little bit. But we're still playing on the Aussie server, so it's 50-player games. So I find that that probably affects things. If you're like getting larger games, it's probably going to be a little bit different, but that's what I'm seeing. It's looking pretty cool. I like the Royale action.
I mean, I did one game earlier today, which would have been like peak primetime EU. It was like 2 p.m. on a Sunday. Probably took about 2 minutes, I'd say, to fill up, and I think it was a 50-person game. So it wasn't like too unreasonable. It was kind of verging on a bit too long. And yeah, I fully agree with the whole dash thing, and I remember Nugiyen talked about this in the last Baeclast. I was having fun, like, oh, this is going pretty well, this is going good. I'm in like the top 20 or whatever it was, early days. And then some guy jumped on me and he had Frostblink and I didn't have a movement skill, and I'm like, there's nothing I can do because I cannot get away from you. This is shit. And it was really frustrating because I was juking all of his casts, but I just couldn't get away from him. So in the end, I just like, okay, I'm dead. And then yeah, and then I'm like, all right, I'm done playing Royale. I'm done. I'll wait until they fix that because it's just there was no point. It was because I for whatever reason there weren't movement skills in the old Royale, like the first Royale, was there? I can't even remember at this point. I don't remember it at all. I just remember lots of like split arrow weapon swapping to Frostblades, and that I loved that iteration of Royale. And this new Royale just hasn't really clicked with me. And I think a lot of it was because of the whole movement skill thing. Because the thing which I used to find really fun about the old one was the way you juke and you dodge people's abilities and like just like haha you can't hit me. That I find really fun. But when people just like and like LMP ball lightning Frostblink on top of you, it's like, oh, I don't, this is shit. I don't want to play this anymore.
Well, like them hard restricting movement skills, like and making them worse and worse, has been, I think, a good play. But I think there's a lot to be gained by having movement skills in there still. It's so awesome when you see someone who's really good with their movement skill timing, like they bait out someone else's movement skill and then they perfectly, place their movement skill to like block someone or zone them against the circle or something like that. Like there's a lot of extra layer of strategy and gameplay there for that movement skill. But having them be weaker and having them have long cooldowns and having them have like interesting utility effects like chilling people and stuff like that's really cool if someone's really using Frostblink well. I think they do add a lot to the game. Plus, old Bayar was so bad with the split arrow, dude. I'm surprised you liked that more. It was just freaking, you're just shooting with like 5 projectiles.
No, see, the reason why that was so fun is because Frostblades was actually better than split arrow back then. So what you would do is it was Frostblades did so much damage. What I used to do,
depending on what gear you got.
Yeah, obviously it depends. But like for me, what I used to always do is I'd have a split arrow set up and I'd weapon swap into a Frostblade setup. So I would dodge out other people's attacks and then like run at them, firing off 1 or 2 shots, and just weapon swap and dunk them with the Frostblades, and they'd be like, "What? I'm dead." And that I thought was really fun. And that aspect of like messing around, I haven't enjoyed as much. But I think if everyone had a dash and maybe in the passive tree you could augment it in the passive tree to either get like more charges or like a chilling thing or a flame dash. I think that's the way they should go for it. I don't know. What do you think, Nugiyen Raiz?
I've just been rerolling, I'll be honest. I like the Royale, I like the commentary for it, but I don't know. I've just been really enjoying trying out different things, so I haven't even played it, quite frankly. Just been playing the game.
I think it's good that movement skills are a lot more streamlined, because if you have too much of a, if people are too like anyone who just you can never get away from makes it not fun. If you can't kind of like time when people like they do that, I do that, and if that doesn't stay the same, if someone has like half the time, well, it doesn't matter what you do because they can keep messing up and they will still kill you. If the getting onto you is the point. So the mobility is just important to keep in check. But I think it's an important part of it. So I think it's important that I think dash just for everyone would be really good.
Yeah.
I think that would be the best. They can experiment with having different like allowing. I mean, they could allow for like they could make unique skills or unique movement things that do have different effects or all sorts of things that so whenever you do use it, it has like an alternate effect. They can do all sorts of stuff with that, but like distance and cooldown I think is important to keep somewhat in check. I mean, the base one could be a little lower so that you do get an advantage, but it's like it's a scary one because it makes people snowball a lot if you have the superior movement. So the ramp thing I think was a good change in the short term. I think it's sidestepping an issue, which is snowballing of XP by killing monsters. It basically allows you to not get a bad spawn to do that. So everyone can now do it more consistently. But the problem still remains that is the proper way of playing the game is avoid people, kill the monsters, get a big XP lead, snowball backwards.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've considered as some feedback is do not allow monsters to scale up before like the middle monsters are so much better because they are like level 10 or something. So one of the suggestions I might add would be, well, there is no differentiation in monster levels until the circle crunches in, and then they upscale within the circle.
Yeah.
And every single time it would upscale. And
you could do that with monster spawning or something as well.
Yeah. I also think there should be like shrines everywhere with monsters and like respawn shrines and stuff for more XP. So that you could, farm up. But you would not be missing out compared to someone who is in the middle and you're on the edge killing monsters. You'll be gaining the same unless the zone was coming in, then you would want to be in the middle. Also further forcing people inwards to fight each other.
Go on, Octavian.
It would be neat if waves of monsters could spawn like around the edges of the circle after a few stages, so that people are encouraged to fight at the edge where it's most dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Someone in chat said breach hands. I love that idea. Like the breach and everyone fights over the monsters. Oh, how sick would that
They
be?
could have betrayal drops as well. They could have like you could take a risk and go for like a betrayal dude. Like they will spawn on you. Go
or like a little fortification
on you.
You have to assault.
You could do everything
intervention might be a little too BS.
I mean, there might be like a region that's like an intervention region. You enter and you get jumped on.
Yeah, so long as it's clearly delineated that you're like opting into this dangerous thing.
Also reveal the map. Straight up. Not with Fog of War, or not with like you can see everything all the time, but with Fog of War. I don't think there's any reason why
reveal
it should
the layout of the map.
Yes.
Terrain layout.
Always be. Yes. And you should clearly see like where are the things you're going for, right? I could go over here to get a box here. I could go over here to get like the big unique drop. I could go over here to get XP.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Right. Is there anything else you want to say about Royale before we move back onto the real game, as the angry people in chat keep saying?
Talk about more important things.
This is a 3-hour show. How dare you spend 10 minutes talking about something else?
This thing's not important to me, so that means it's not important. Anyway, sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
Venting. I like the Royale. It's important to me.
But yeah, has anyone else got anything they want to say about it? Okay, now I guess we have to talk about the real
It's
game.
alright.
Ugh.
Yeah, time to talk about real game. Important
Okay,
things, let's
so I want to start with some baby rage, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about this. So on the last Baeclast, I told everyone, as I've been telling a lot of people about the fun seismic trap alt quality that GGG forgot to update, and people spent a lot of money on that. It doesn't affect me in the slightest. I play SSF. I never had an alt quality gem, but GGG, they went and they patched it. So instead of it giving reduced cast speed and damage, when the cast speed did nothing, it now like has reduced wave frequency, completely killing the gem, which meant that anyone that invested currency into it just basically got told to fuck off. I don't know.
Why did you mention it on the last podcast?
Because it was fun. And go on, Nuggy.
Okay, so I think anyone investing into it after the fact that you revealed that they had missed it is basically running into, dangerous waters. That is like every time something like that has been found, there's a very high risk that they fix it. And if you're just moving on information that you've gotten where it's been brought to the to the center of attention for devs as well, like because they do listen. I mean, they were literally in the chat. Yeah. I think that is something. Then you can't complain if you're basing it on I got that piece of information. I should get this. Okay, you didn't know before. Now you got. I don't know. On that point, I'm like, should they like change this? I think it's unfortunate that they make it terrible.
I mean, yeah, it's literally like you would never use it.
Yes, and I think that's a mistake. Making it like actually getting some proper balance on the thing versus it having no downside, only upside, I think is bad. But I mean, it is the most important stat on that thing is literally the thing that they kill. Yeah. And I think that's just why would you just make the gem into basically nothing? And the thing is, it's their main gem that they're using as well.
Yeah.
So like, you can't actually use the gem after the fact.
Yeah. Because it's one of those things of, it's not like this introduces any cool new functionality or anything.
No.
It's just damage.
Like an example of what they could have done is if they wanted to be quirky with it, is they could have done something like has 100% less damage, but way faster cooldown. So then you could use it as a clear skill. And then it's like, oh, that's interesting. But there's literally no reason to use this new version of the gem. And one thing which I found quite funny about it is GG had forgotten to update the Helm enchants, because there was still a bunch of Helm enchants giving cast speed to cooldown traps. So I then was like, you might want to update those. And they did then update those. But I found it kind of funny that it's kind of like, oh, whoopsie, we didn't change this alt quality. We'll kill that. But then they didn't proactively think to then make the Helm enchants actually do something. Which, I don't know. I'm not... From my point of view, because some people are like, oh, but it's an obvious exploit. It should have been addressed. It's kind of... With stuff like that, I feel like with old PoE, a lot of old PoE was finding out these quirky little things and making the most of them. And that'd be the kind of thing that should be on a build of the week. And everyone would be like, haha, this is funny for a patch. And then it would get fixed at a later point. But just removing that completely. And it's the same thing with the explosive concoction offhand thing. Like that to me is the most anti-GGG change I've seen them make. So for anyone who isn't aware, with explosive concoction, it literally says in the gem, your main hand must be empty, which is basically wink, wink, nudge, nudge, put your weapon in your offhand, and you can still use the skill. Like 2 people on PoE Ninja were doing that. I tried looking, it was literally like 2 people. And it was one guy had a corrupted additional projectile EWARs, so he forced it into his offhand by having a mule in his main hand that didn't have the stats for. So he was getting +2 proj and a bunch of wed damage from his offhand. Cool. His build's neat. And GGG's completely removed that functionality. And anyone who was doing offhand shenanigans with explosive concoction, their build just doesn't work that way anymore. So anything they invested into their offhand crafting is dead. And that's not just like, oh, use EWARs. For example, using heist, like elemental overload scepters in your offhand or secrets of suffering scepters. I was really excited because I got an Ellie overload scepter from heist, and I picked that like, yo, I'm going to use this for an explosive concoction build. That's going to be massive for my build. I know I'm going to need to route all the way over to Witch. I can make a really cool character. And GG just like, nope, screw that interaction. And it's a skill which is like barely playable to start with.
Well, I don't think so. The skill itself should not. Okay, so there's first of all, I don't think the skill matters here. And I'll explain why. It's because it's the same as well. There's a lot of other skills in the game that worked because of stat sticking as well.
Okay.
So do we want stat sticking back or not? Because it's essentially the same thing.
Well, I mean, shield skills.
Yeah.
Like that whole archetype, you still have stat sticking, right?
Yes, you do.
The most powerful, most popular build at the moment abuses stat sticking because they get to use their main hand weapon for whatever, you know.
So is that? But the question then is that something that should just be in the game again? I mean, because that is something they could reintroduce. And with the power, like they have nerfed, what's it called? They've nerfed a lot of the stuff that made stat sticking good in the first place as well.
Dual wielding, yeah.
Well, I think in the case of shield skills, I wasn't trying to like say, oh, they shouldn't have them. In the case of shield skills, like given it's an entirely different archetype, that's it's got its own identity, so it operates differently. So you can sacrifice your main hand to scaling utility or damage stats or something. That makes plenty of sense to me. So I don't think we need to reinvestigate the state of stat sticks in the game as a whole in order to justify it for shield skills to have it.
Sure.
Or for explosive concoction. I'm with Tarke on this one.
But I mean, if the thing that makes the skill work, okay, so I agree that if this is what made people be able to play it, well, maybe then do a mid-league buff to explosive concoction.
Exactly. Because they could have because they've already buffed skills this league. They could have very easily gone, this is going to hurt some people's builds. Some people are making explosive concoction work, but some people making it work doesn't make it a good skill. Because as soon as I said that, people are like, actually, Tarke, it's an amazing skill. It's basically an Ellie hit that you can't scale with a weapon with awkward targeting. Like,
I can see the reason. I can see potentially a reasoning behind the change being that like this is a powerful tool that this build gets to use, and arguably it limits their ability to buff the skill because players are getting this extra power that they didn't intend. Because I'm assuming they didn't intend this, that's why they changed it. And a lot of people playing Explosive Concoction probably weren't using it because they didn't think of it or didn't notice it or didn't know they could do that. So they want to, open up the space to be able to buff Explosive Concoction and not have it be busted because people are then using the buffed skill alongside a really powerful offhand. But finding weird edge cases like that and making clever use of them is a large part of the game. That is where I think that whole argument breaks down, is that like doing something clever, even if most people aren't going to realize it and do it, is like part of why you play PoE.
Yeah. Like, as I said before, like it's the kind of interaction that if this skill came out 5 years ago would have been on build of the week. Like it is very much a build of the week interaction. I remember the old Facebreaker thing where like it was, oh, you put Black Gleam on as a quiver. Like it's a very PoE kind of system. And I can completely understand them saying, we don't want this, but why not change it next league? I really don't understand why that's something you would change mid-league and
Wait,
not
really?
even...
You said that 2 people used it. I think this is like a objectively bad change, right? It's always better to make something like change it in a way that still keeps it playable. But in this case specifically, I think they're just worried about nerfing more shit in the future. Like if people continue to use this, if Explosive Concoctions becomes meta, and then they're like, well, actually, we didn't intend for this, let's change it now, then it just makes more sense to nerf it now. It doesn't make sense for the players who are actually playing it. Same thing for the trap, which is, in my opinion, like objectively terrible change. But I mean, yeah, I think they're not thinking straight when it comes to this stuff.
Can I also just say, because a lot of people like, it's obviously not intended, like how did it even get through? I don't think it's that creative of a system. I'm honestly shocked the skill got made and they didn't intend for that to be. I fully thought that when they announced the skill, it's like they're aware people are going to do this, because it's not like a weird interaction. Because a lot of,
I mean, it is a weird interaction. You have a
lot of skills
wield, and therefore you have a.
Like it's not new.
Tarke. They did. Okay, so like invoking like old PoE and then being like, but then it was like, I don't know. I feel it awkward to like say, oh, but this is how the game used to be. But nothing in the game anymore is that way.
Except for the shield skills.
No, but they're not that way. They're intended. They're built that way. They're not. You're not doing something where it's like, because it's unusable, you can then take advantage of it. It is literally you. It's like a spellcaster or with a shield. It's like the stats on a okay, no, actually the other way around. Anyone attacking with a weapon that has stats on the shield can also benefit from that on their main hand. It's intended.
I don't know.
It was back then. I mean, the game was based around that. It made sense for SSD to function that way because stat sticking was so prevalent. But since they were wanting to get rid of it, I don't think. Well, they did design SSD with that in mind. I don't think they designed this skill with that in mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's.
I totally get that. Like a lot of the creativity that comes around this, but invoking the way it used to be in PoE, I don't think is. But because like if that's the case, well then we should argue for having all of it back.
It's
Sunder's back.
I think the biggest issue, the most glaring part of this to me is the fact that it was done as a mid-league change, though. Because I don't know. I think we can agree that explosive concoction was not a problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute.
Like this wasn't an issue.
What if you just don't know? What if internally they've designed this build that's actually the best build in the game and you just don't know? The community's not smart enough.
Then let players find that eventually. And then change it.
Then players complain.
And then change it in the patch notes going into 3.16 and maybe bundle it with, an overall wholesale buff to explosive concoction as well.
Yeah. It's the final thing I'm going to say on about it is like it reminds me a lot of the whole Hate Forge thing from last league. And there were people doing Hate Forge traps, and it was a legitimate build, and they killed the build because they fixed an interaction. The guy was actually like, you just bricked my build that I've spent the entire league building on. And they actually reverted to the change and said, we'll do it next league. We've learned our lesson. And it's like, well, you haven't, because you've just bricked some people's builds. Who would like relying on this entire interaction for their whole build is built around this interaction. And they've just said no, and it's one of those things where like I can completely understand like if the skill guy was like actually Tarke, yeah, I didn't intend for that to happen. I'm not going to argue no, you did intend for that to happen. I can completely understand why they did the change. It's just the fact they changed it the way they did this late into the league as well. One thing that I'd be interested to hear you guys' thoughts on. So I was watching the last Faded Connections recently, and they were talking about this whole mid-league nerf and buff thing and how they feel about it. And Baeclast said something which I thought was quite interesting. He said he would be completely in favor of like a date being set, like a rough date, kind of like the end of the first week of the league or whatever, like the first Monday or whatever, where players can fully expect skills to get buffed or nerfed if they're crazy overperforming or underperforming, and then players kind of know where they stand. I think when you make changes like this, it sets a very uneasy precedent that you don't really know anymore. And so much of Path of Exile and with the bans with MP last league is like, well, what is clever use of game mechanics? What isn't clever use of game mechanics? And when you just have changes that happen like this with no explanation, completely unrecognized, how are you actually meant to know where you stand with anything?
Yeah, I think that is the core of the issue. Like how are folks using this mechanic meant to anticipate that like this wasn't intended, like because with something like Facebreaker you can equip a weapon that you can't wield and then throw some gems into it and level those gems. Is that not okay as well? Should you just not be treated as actually holding a weapon that you have equipped but you can't use? Like there's a lot more edge cases like this than you might imagine. Like the change to Reaper, for instance. I mentioned in the last podcast that's really similar to how Stormbind works, where you can get the second gem for Stormbind and give it different links and then blow up your runes with a different link setup than the ones that you place them with. Like, is that just safe because it's obscure as hell and nobody plays that gem? Should that also be changed? Like, I hesitate to say it, but the build that I'm using right now is using an interaction that could be argued one way or another. Secrets of Suffering prevents you from applying Ignite, Chill, and Shock and causes your critical strikes to sap, brittle, and scorch. There's a long list of ailments there. I almost didn't remember them all. Painseeker is a pair of gloves that gives you more non-damaging ailment effect and causes your critical strikes to not inherently apply ailments. But with Secrets of Suffering, you still apply Scorch, Brittle, and Sap because you don't inherently apply those. Secrets of Suffering causes you to apply those, which means the glove doesn't turn it off. So are you inherently able to apply those things now? Or is it not
Tarke.
Something you're inherently allowed to do?
He's gonna drag all of us down, Tarke. I want to keep my account. Kick him.
No, fuck it.
Like,
GGG, ban this entire fucking podcast or no balls. Fuck you.
Is that clever use of game mechanics getting around the use of the word inherently, or is it just something GGG forgot?
Okay,
I have no fucking clue.
Sorry, guys.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
yeah, you're welcome. No, it's cool.
It's re-roll in.
It's cool. But no, real talk, ban Octavian. But no, it's exactly that whole thing. I find it so frustrating because so much of PoE, for me anyway, is finding those interactions and celebrating like, oh, I came up with this cool thing. And when you no longer know, like, is this something that is intended? Can I do this? Can I not do this? It's just, ugh.
Yeah, I thought for the longest time they were against something like this in general. That's why they weren't doing the mid-league like buff and unbuffs, I guess, or nerfs. And now they're doing it, and it feels very, very weird. But I mean, they started off with the buffs, so maybe their justification in this was like, oh, if we're gonna buff, then we can also nerf guys. But I don't know. I don't think in the cases that you guys mentioned specifically, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
What do you think, Ziggy? You've been quite quiet through all of this.
I think I agree with the point that like they're going to be very careful about any sort of mid-league nerfs, even if it is like a fairly obvious like, oh, we missed this, we got to fix this, just because of that point where it's like, well, someone's going to probably quit now because they were really enjoying their build and now it died. Obviously, there is always extreme examples where you're like, okay, this probably needs to be fixed for whatever reason, like it's literally an exploit. But I also too am feeling this whole when Octavian was having his story, I'm like,
breakdown.
I'm like, are you getting banned? Are you getting bug fixed? Or are you getting put into a build of the week video? Like, what's the outcome in these situations? I'm like, I also feel like I'm not actually clear these days. Like, 5 years ago I would have said, oh, you've been put into a build of the week video, but now I'm not so sure which direction it goes. So it would be nice to have a bit more clarity on that in the future, like what their approach to this stuff is.
I mean, my final thing that I'll say on it, and the part of the reason why I'm so frustrated is I was really excited to make a build around this interaction, and I spoke about this interaction in a video before they made the change, and I know that some GGG people watch my stuff, so it's kind of like, am I now in a situation wherever I find like a cool interaction, can I not talk about it if I want to play it? Like, do I have to play the build, then afterwards I can make a video being like, oh, there's this cool interaction guy? And it's that whole thing, like, that's the thing which I find really frustrating. Because it's like, you know?
Okay. I know you want to move on from this point, but can I just throw in one more example? And it's an old as fuck one.
Go for it.
Life gain on kill being attributed to the player from dots that are sourced from like traps and mines and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that is a core part of the game. That has been in the game for a long time. It's like accepted and stuff. But imagine that were something that we just recently found, Like, wouldn't that fall into this same category? Like, oh, weird, you're getting life gain on kill from your traps killing things because it killed it with a dot. Is that supposed to work that way? I mean, it is meant to work that way because of the chain of where damage comes from and some stuff that Mark explained very intelligently in a post that went over my head a little bit. But like, if you're just looking at it as a player who's just now figured that out, you don't really know where you stand necessarily.
Actually, you do, sort of. I'll explain why. So it's basically Bloodline mods tells you. The corrupting blood on Bloodline mods, you will immediately notice that you start inheriting all the things because you killed. Like, that is the biggest tell of this is actually, like, it's super obvious that therefore it follows that, yes.
Okay, but saying that, there are some weird things where certain use things don't work with traps. Like, there are some curse stuff on rings that don't work with traps. Like, there's a lot of weird you things that do and don't work with traps and totems. So even that, like, that's not even a surefire rule that you can follow.
No. But if you are worried whether or not you should be getting it, whether or not you would be, assumed to be an exploiter. I mean, since the game already works that way, it's like it's supposed to work like that.
That to me sounds way more unintuitive than my offhand thing, because nearly everyone has played a Facebreaker build.
Intuitive,
right?
But it's like it's intended.
Right. Okay.
He's talking about means of testing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair.
And whether or not you can actually find, information within the game that tells you.
But yeah, I didn't mean to sidetrack us further. We had another thing.
No, it's a good train of thought to go down, and I find that stuff very interesting. And this is also kind of why on the last podcast I was sort of saying that it's this sort of thing, which is why I kind of don't like mid-league buffs, because mid-league buffs invites this kind of stuff. Because if you say it's okay for GG to buff things mid-league, it also invites GG to fix and nerf things mid-league.
It doesn't have to. You don't have to.
I mean, it
I
doesn't
mean,
you
have
could have
to,
said the
but
same
it
thing the
has.
other way around when they nerfed it. Well, why couldn't you just buff it at the same time? Like, they haven't really buffed things before, but they could have, because they've nerfed things before. I mean, nerfing things has been something they've been doing for a long time. I remember like the BV thing as well, where the stack was gaining the full duration point. It was something like full damage poison would still apply. Like, they've nerfed stuff all like since forever I can remember. If it was super out of whack.
I think that last line is the most important thing, though. Like, if it was super out of whack.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like explosive concoction, exactly.
Yeah.
But you can argue for the same thing for buffs. If this is like underperforming to an extreme degree, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to buff it. It doesn't mean that they have to all the time. Like, it's within their purview to decide where it goes. I do think it's important that they give us some clear guidelines whether or not you are in danger of being banned. Like, what is the right course of action? Do we, whenever we figure something out, when it pertains to builds and mechanics, is that a message to support? If we continue to use it in the in-between, do we then get banned? Or is it just up for grabs, but we should not, as long as we've correctly reported it, but we could expect a nerf? And if you hadn't reported it, then I don't know. I mean, where it's important that they just clarify where this line lies, and they gave us better opportunities to, interact with them on this matter.
I just think that all the buffs and all the nerfs have been pretty bad. Like, Absolution, by a lot of people's means, isn't strong enough. Explosive Concoction still doesn't make sense. I guess the one good buff was the Blade Trap. I think they overbuffed Reaper, where now people are doing like no damage builds that have 10 million DPS because people kept saying how terrible it was. I don't know. I feel like they were hasty, and just waiting around for them would have been better overall.
The Reaper thing I find very interesting, because basically Reaper is good if you build it the one way it works, which is the whole bleed thing. And it's like, if you're doing the bleed thing, good build. But like, for everyone who didn't build it that way, which is most people who try to build it, it's like awful skill. And it does feel a bit weird to me that they did design a skill which is... are there any other skills or many other skills which are just like, you have this one way to play it or nothing else, really?
I mean, you said bleed. Bleed is like a full archetype. It's like, you build this poison or it doesn't work. You could say Viper Strike. Like, try building that, not poison, and then tell me it's good.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess it's just, in my head it's kind of different. I guess in my head it's kind of different because it's the first ailment minion, because we've never had an ailment minion before.
Right.
Well, most minions used to be ailments until they removed double dipping and completely killed that, to the point where now they're saying they should look into it. It used to be very popular. An example of a mid-league nerf that got out of hand was the Burning Miscreations. Those weren't ailments, but it was a cast on death Burning Miscreations that were dealing like 4,000% more damage than they were supposed to.
Yeah.
That was cool. they waited until the first person got to level 100 with it, and then they nerfed it. It was like, oh, what a league.
Now I'm just giggling about skills built awfully, like crit essence drain and LE puncture.
Well,
So
Ignite
good.
Essence Drain used to be a thing because
Yeah.
it got
Elemental
damage
Celest,
from
yeah.
spell damage, So you could scale it because it's damage over time.
You could also do some really cool shock impulsor essence strain things with old Elementalist. Derek, the hideout guy, he did like a level 100 on Elementalist essence strain.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Not cool. Remove it.
Can we just say though briefly on the bleed thing? I don't like ensnaring arrow as a skill. It feels very weird to me that it's like every bleed build is kind of just like, oh, you can't even ensnaring arrow. There's your damage feels a bit kind of eh.
It's a weird one. It's too much of a jump, I feel. I do agree. I had the same problem when I was playing Bleed EQ and a bunch of other ones. It's like, you either use this or you suck. Or you're Steel Mage and you like gear for 3 weeks and then you have an Omega character that uses fucking Crimson Dance with EQ and it still works because who needs Warcries? I don't know. That works too. But they nerfed that as well, so now he can't play it either. It's too much of a jump. 300% more damage is just so extreme.
Yeah, I mean, it might just be that the issue is with the multi for moving enemies and having too much of your damage bound up in that in a bleed build. Maybe lower that and buff some other stuff for bleed builds to compensate so that they're not as reliant on it.
I mean, it just seems odd to me that they just designed it to be just a bow skill. Like, they could have made a trap or something, or like make it like puncture is melee and bow, and it's just kind of weird that there's like, but it's a fucking bow skill. I'm like, what?
Ensnaring slap. Anyone
There you
can
go.
use it.
Hey, you could design a new mark.
Or you can make it like chain hook. You throw a rope at a dude. Like there's ways that like with all the cool skills in Path of Exile, it's like the only way we could ever see a rope being on an enemy is being shot by a bow. Like it wouldn't be that mad to just throw a rope at someone. You know what I mean?
Make it a net skill. I want a net skill in the video game. I've wanted a net skill since fucking ExileCon.
Less so.
I think it's kind of like Fortify, where they like didn't intend for casters to use Fortify, and it was supposed to be this like melee buffing thing, but then everybody just uses it, and this is the same. Like, this is how you're gonna make your bow build work, and it's like, no, this is how I play Earthquake, bitch. Get it out of here.
This is for my summoner now.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, so when it comes to mid leagues, there's also been some improvements. Instilling orbs on bench. How do we feel about that? The "I told you so" change.
We did it, Reddit. I mean, podcast it. We did it. Taking full credit for that. I know other people were suggesting it, but I'm taking full credit for it personally.
No, it wasn't them.
It's the bobble buff that we deserved.
Yeah, I gotta give this one to you, Bobble Boy.
Yeah.
Have you got your watchstones ready for the full Bobble Atlas?
Working on it. I've been getting all my basic watchstones. I know you don't really have to do that anymore, but it still feels like a point of pride.
Octavian, it was a joke. Stop collecting the watchstones. Come on. You're sick.
I'm gonna do it.
I know you will. That's the problem.
There's another one that I wanted to test this league though. There's an equally shit and stupid idea. It's a watchstone mod that gives, I think it's like 1% to 2% chance for amulets to drop as talismans with an anoint instead. I'm gonna stack a bunch of that and get a ton of garbage talismans. It's gonna be fun.
Sounds
We're
great.
gonna get talismans nerfed again. It's unbelievable. You're laughing, but maybe one person was doing that.
What was that? Sorry,
you reckon they can give influenced talismans if it's like an influenced map and an amulet drops and then it re-rolls into a talisman? You reckon it would be an influenced talisman?
I don't think that's possible because you can't turn an influenced amulet into a talisman at Jorgen bench. So I feel like they don't want those to exist.
This might be an exception to that rule.
Maybe
the game would tell itself that it is not eligible to be turned into a talisman.
Or maybe it'll try to turn it into a talisman and then it can't, and so it just deletes the amulet drop. And I never.
Why can't we have influenced talismans? Like, what is
tinfoil hat?
What is the reasoning behind why we can't have influenced talismans?
I guess to make it more of a choice at the top end, whether you go for a talisman or an influenced item. Like some talisman implicits, if you get a good amulet and use it on the Organ bench, can be really strong. You get like fucking 38 crit multi or 10% life or.
See, like, but this is why I don't understand PoE, right? Like, this is my exact issue with GGG is that, like, we can't have talisman influence amulets. That'd be too broken. but they'll be like, Maven tier 0 orbs is fine.
I think that's everybody's problem with GGG.
Because it's like when if you like in this scenario, right, where we've got Trade League Andy, he's crafted his perfect influenced amulet, it's got all the mods on it he wants, and he wants to turn it into a talisman. It could turn into all sorts of stuff. Most of the talisman results won't be that great for him. And we're like, well, you can't have that, it'd be too powerful.
I think it's just that the game doesn't get updated holistically every time they go through and raise power levels. You know, you have this super wide playing field of different crafting options and builds, and like when they buff a thing, they'll buff like something over here, but the talisman stuff doesn't get looked at that league because they have 3 months to develop a league, so that, you know, restriction stays in place and isn't necessarily at the same power level as where Maven rewards are. So maybe in the future, it'll change, and then we can have influenced talismans. Yeah, I don't think they'd be too busted powerful in current PoE, but it seems like they want to trend backwards in terms of power, so...
They would make stat stacking unbearable.
Yeah?
Yeah, because you get double stat percentage with another stat percentage stat.
Yep.
I mean, it's like,
the number of amulets that would die on the bench trying to make that, though. That would be, I mean, kind of disgusting.
I don't know.
I guess the upside is you couldn't mirror it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's to me, it seems similar to like a double corruption bench.
Exactly.
You know? Where you've got this risk that it's going to...
it never deletes it.
Yeah, that's true. It never completely ruins your item. Though, in the case of stat stacking, removing a stat implicit is more of a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
I don't know. There's like lots of things with that. And I wanted to ask you guys about this, like in context of the nerfs, now that we've played for a bit longer and we're feeling about it. But like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, why don't they just nerf itemization? Is it because they're worried about people in standard? Like, why are we nerfing base skill gems and not the itemization?
Okay, so if I can say something here on the base, because I actually think the base skill here was a good change, because there was too much of a distinction between the one that had some utility and the raw power. And the raw power was always winning out. Like now, there's actually, if you, like whenever I go through my gem choices, I definitely feel way less obligated to use just raw power. I feel that I lose way less now when I'm trying to, I'm just going to put in a little utility. I'm not losing that much. And I think that's really important. That doesn't mean that they got all the balance right this patch, but I think they actually managed to do what they wanted here.
I think that gets kneecapped by all of the damage coming down to the point where you're like, oh, I can't afford to use the utility gem. I think in a lot of cases, unless your build is already very good at that point, you're like thinking, like, conceptually, I agree with the idea of like shortening the distance between utility stuff and pure damage stuff for exactly that reason. But I do think it gets interrupted by everyone's damage, you know, being lower, and then you being kind of forced into getting as much as possible to reach like a minimum viable threshold.
But would you say we're closer? Because like just saying like we can't do it because we're not perfect is, I don't know, that's not really a way forward.
Well,
I'm definitely not saying that.
I just think that's an issue for like, because realistically, was there ever a world where they could have looked like at every setup or even the majority of like gems or builds and like made that work? I think it makes sense that they would release this like large sweeping change that, you know, fucked over a lot of people, brought up some other things, and made it work. And the next patch, hopefully, they're gonna like look at specific skills. What worries me is the stuff that you guys talked about before, where there are individual abilities that are hurting from changes, which again, I was under the impression the next league is gonna be kind of like okay, so we fucked over all of these skills. Let's try and bring them back up to like be at a reasonable power level.
See, I'm in favor of these changes, and I could be wrong. I don't know anything about next league, but I think that mindset is incredibly optimistic, because for GGG to actually go, we've prepared a list of every single underperforming skill that we are going to balance to like.
Oh, but it doesn't have to be every single skill. That's the thing. Like,
right.
I don't know. A lot of people criticize this stuff, but you know, last league there were 60% of the people playing Blade Blast.
Right.
Like, do you realistically need build diversity when you can make one really fun build that literally everybody plays? I mean, a lot of people claim that they play multiple builds and different builds and all this stuff, but like the stats kind of speak for themselves. And sure, you can play that character and then roll another one, but and again, bringing up build diversity would be great, but you know, the people are saying that there's no diversity and there's no skills anymore. I agree that there's like a significantly lower amount, but listen, if you played the meta build, chances are that you can find 2 or 3 more builds before you get bored of PoE that you get to play and still like enjoy it. There's definitely a much smaller list, which sucks, and I hope that individually they're going to take a look at different things, but to say that like every player needs to have 100 different builds that they can play, I mean, I don't know, that doesn't really serve a purpose, I think, from like GGG's point of view. I'd be surprised anyway. I think they'd like the idea of that, but it's just not really feasible with the amount of different things that are happening with Path of Exile every single league.
I mean, I think the issue lies in what, and I said this like before we even got the numbers on the spot gym changes. The issue kind of sucks for the people who's like, I always kind of played these kind of middling builds. A good example of this is I was very tempted to make just a straight cremation character. Not Archmage cremation, just like straight cremation. And I'm like, ooh, I wonder if that's really going to have the damage in endgame. Let me ask Octavian. Octavian's played a lot of cremation. I'm like, Octavian, how do you feel about just straight cremation? And Octavian's response was like, I mean, it might, maybe, oh, I don't know if I'd recommend. If you went Scion, you could always go into Archmage if you had to. And that's kind of an example of where I was like, there's quite a few people like that. And the reality is, I was talking to Grimro earlier today, we were on a call, and he was saying, and I think the numbers are even more extreme than this, but he was saying, like, the thing is 95% of the builds are made by 5% of the players. So whenever you have a massive patch like this, there's obviously way less options out there because people are still playing catch-up. And in reality, it's probably like 1% of the fucking builds. But then you have a lot of people who just make their own builds, and they're all shit, by the way, or the majority is shit. And those guys are really struggling by these changes. You guys are making funny faces. I'm not saying it's impossible to make a decent build by yourself, but I don't think it's a wild take for me to say a lot of people are making their own builds and they're not very good. I don't think that's a crazy statement for me to make.
I think a lot of the
part of the game.
I think a lot of the constriction of the current meta comes from the fact that like it's twofold. There was the nerf, which did lower the power for a lot of different builds, which made them a lot less enticing. And then there's also the element you're talking about where people feel less confident in building their own characters, especially after a swath of nerfs. And so they're more likely to gravitate towards the handful of things that have been found to be powerful so far. I do personally think that the meta is potentially a lot broader than traps and shield skills. I mean, already just in what like we've played on this podcast, though I am currently playing a trapper, there's, you know, a handful of other skills.
Same.
There's like Spectral Helix that Nugi played and did well with. There's some General's Cry stuff that still looks good. There's War Chief Totems that Waggle is demolishing the entire game with right now. Like there's a good number of builds out there, but people are less inclined to experiment in a patch that feels like it's clamping down on a lot of that experimentation.
I mean, the thing is too that like there's a limit to something like that as well, and I don't know if that's entirely on GGG. Like for instance, today in my chat there was a guy who was like, Raiz, no matter what numbers I run, my Cyclone Crimson Dance bleed build is just not working. What can I do? What advice can you give me to make it work? And I'm just like, dude, I mean, that concept just has zero synergy. Like, what can you do? I don't think you can do much in that case. Like, there's not really a fixable build because it doesn't make sense from the get-go. Is that now on GGG to like... And like the thing is, if you throw currency at it, you're still going to be able to make it work. Like, it'll absolutely deal with everything and all this stuff. But is it on GGG now to like take that concept that's intended for like 100 different things and now make it the 101st thing to work with like Cyclone, Crimson Dance? I mean, that's an impossible job for them. Like, how can they ever like do that realistically in a perfect world? Sure, I would love for that guy's build to work, but it just can't. I don't feel like it can.
So,
I mean,
no, go on, Octavian. I'll go afterwards.
Ideally, it's not about anticipating builds that players might make and then preemptively making them viable. It's about building systems that have enough interesting interplay and interaction that players find cool builds within them.
Sure. So like use Lacerate instead of Cyclone.
Or Blade Storm that got buffed.
Or even Earthquake, like, you know.
But yeah, Tarke was going to say something.
Right. So like we've had a few points in Path of Exile before where it was possible to make any terrible idea work. The double dipping was a great example of that. You could take any skill, and as long as it went Ignite or Poison at the end of its damage thing, it just worked. And this is why, like, I'm fully in favor of the nerfs. I'm fully in favor of making PvE more challenging. But it does kind of raise the question that if this approach of like attacking the bottom end, like the base starting point of builds by going for the gems, but leaving the itemization the same. And again, this is the issue I have as well, is I don't know what GGG is doing next. So without the context of these current changes, I find it impossible to work anything out, because it's like, I don't know what they're doing. But like, assuming that the itemization is staying the same, you have this situation where it's kind of like, the people are still going to be trivializing the content if they've got the currency.
I don't get what you understand. Like, what you mean by attacking the bottom end?
The gems. No, but the gems are literally the base of a character. The gem is the literal end. Like, if you have no gear equipped, the gems. When I say bottom end, I don't mean of the player base. I mean the base of your build. The very base of your build is the skill gems.
Yeah.
The foundation. They've nerfed the foundation of all builds.
Yes.
Right.
Because we're doing too much damage.
Yes. No. I understand that, Nugi. What I'm saying is they've nerfed the foundation, but they haven't changed the building blocks.
It's the question, I guess, is
no, but
where
they have, because they've also
the items are the same. They haven't touched the items. The items are the exact same power.
So you want the items? Okay, so you want the items to change?
Yeah. So what I'm kind of saying is, would they not have been better off bringing down the items so players' foundations remain the same? So that way, players are much more comfortable because their core fundamental hasn't been ruined. Right. And then, because it's like, no, go on.
So I actually agree with that point, but I also think you are not accepting the point that they're also trying to do the secondary part, which is bridging the gap between the skill gems themselves, so that you feel like you have more choice.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that.
Right,
but
that you can only do but you cannot have so the top like you needed to bring that back. Otherwise, you would need to just add multipliers to all the other. That would be the opposite way. But then we're just introduced. That would eventually introduce power creep into this patch, which is not what they wanted.
So like my thing with PoE, my stance from the very beginning and from like our first episode of Baeclast has always been bring the top of players down, bring the bottom of players up. And in my mind, by attacking the foundation...
Players or builds?
Same shit.
Is it though?
No, it's not the same.
Okay, fine. But anyway, let me just finish this point, then we can break down the semantics. My whole thought process by attacking the gems, right, is people are now way more cautious. As I've experienced this myself, I've been way more cautious with the kinds of builds I'm playing, right? People generally are way more cautious with the kind of builds they're playing, so they're more likely to just go for what they think works. You're reducing player creativity. If they have enough currency, yes, you can make anything work. Path of Exile has always been like that. But I feel like the actual approach they've taken is reducing player creativity, and I don't think that's ever a good thing.
I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle. I think the problem there extends from how Flask and survivability are so intrinsically tied to damage. And that's just kind of like what we were talking about at the start of this whole conversation, Nugi, is that I feel like when you're at a point where you're like, I need to go all the damage gems, I can't take any utility stuff, because if I don't deal enough damage, everything's going to kill me really quickly in Path of Exile, and I'm not going to get any Flask charges, and then things are going to kill me as well. Yes. So I think that's kind of where that's the thing that undermines the approach here, I think.
So that means that, but the thing is, there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed then. That doesn't, because the thing is, like, if everything you look at is they did a change here, and because that didn't fix everything, we have to immediately revert all that, even though that the underlying issues might be where the true issue lies. And I actually also think, like, when you're talking about why can't we make them into talismans and all that, well, I think it's good that you have Because you really want to use the talisman as a power, and I think it's important that we have the choice: should I go a talisman or an influence item? However, right now it's very rare that you even make that choice because influence items are too strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that we need to make everything be able to do everything, being able to do Awakened Talisman, Double Corrupted, and I don't know, Triple Enchanted amulets. It's more like you should feel like you had a choice.
It all comes back to the talisman nerfs. All of this would work out perfectly if they hadn't nerfed talismans.
Yeah.
I think they're also scared of fucking with people's items, you know?
Yes.
For the longest
Yeah.
time, whenever like any PR, anything was happening, Chris would always say like Path of Exile's itemization is like its strongest asset. Our itemization is better than like in any RPG. And then they released Harvest, and you know that kind of changed things. And then they nerfed it, and then they buffed it, and then they nerfed it, and now like it is what it is. I think they worry about that sort of stuff.
I completely agree with that. This is a spicy take. So I said this when influence items first came out and everyone called me an idiot, but I'm curious if you guys think differently now. I think influence items and fucking double influence items and Maven Tizzer and all that was a fucking mistake. Like such a massive mistake. Because they're now in this situation where they're trying to address player power, and as you say themselves, they don't want to mess with people's items. And now they're like, they feel like they can't fuck with it. It was such a massive mistake. And I fucking said it day one, and you all called me, oh, Tarke, you don't like people being powerful. I said, no, they fucked their game.
I like influenced items. I like them.
I like influenced items in a void, but like...
I think some of the affixes that they have are overtuned in particular instances, and you know maybe there shouldn't be as many sources of, say, gem level scaling. As an example, getting like 2 on an amulet and potentially 2 on a weapon and 1 on a shield, and then also plus gems on your chest piece, and like it gets a little absurd at that point. But like I don't think the whole concept should be tossed out because of a couple edge cases that push certain archetypes or builds to an extreme.
The thing is, the average player also doesn't take it to the extreme.
Yeah,
like,
no.
It's like a small layer on top of it for the majority of people. And then some people like really go crazy with these things, which people should be able to continue to develop their character past a certain point.
It makes a lot of gear slots a lot more interesting and a lot less just have some life and res in this slot. It also like opens up a lot of weird stats as something you could potentially invest into a ton. Like you could invest into chance to gain double armor when you defend from an attack and get as many sources of that as you can and then try and go for Mondo armor build. People don't, but you could. And maybe that's going to be relevant 2 leagues from now with some specific build. Like a lot of the time, weird secondary stats like that are spread across a few influenced items here or there have popped to the forefront of the meta because of a shift and have made for some really interesting crafting projects.
I think the thing I really like about the influence system is that at any point GGG can get rid of the current set of conquerors, bring in a new set of whatever endgame mechanic is happening with different and new influences, and then everything changes.
Yeah.
And they
have new mods.
Like, I don't know if they can.
Sure,
look at the feedback that they're getting now on changes that are so minor by comparison. You know, just completely rechanging like all of the influence stuff when people are raging so much about losing 30% more damage or something.
I mean, just look at Elder and Shaper stuff. Like that's still accessible and they got replaced. I think my whole thing with like I'm not against the idea of influence items even existing. It's just the fact that so much of Path of Exile's past power was always built around the idea of we'll give you something really powerful with a downside. And that was core to GGG at a fundamental level. And it was like that for years. And then there was just like 3 or 4 years of them completely ignoring that mindset. And with there's no downside to an influenced item. Because it's just strictly better. And then when they introduced double influence, it wasn't even a case of, I need to pick which influence item I want. Because you can have 2 of them.
I think the balancing mechanism is meant to be that because they've said a few times that they wanted to shift towards a really nice rare and a perfectly curated item in a given slot being a chase item as opposed to a unique like something like Starforge being a chase item. And I think the balancing mechanism is meant to be the fact that making your three influenced affix item is just really freaking hard to do.
The problem is that kind of like goes into the whole like chase item problem. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about how there's no chase items in PoE right now, or they're not feeling thrilled about the chase item situation. And I think like the problem is that those items are very complicated for the average PoE player to understand how to go about getting them, what they do, what they are, and they're not as obvious a chase item target. The thing that's good about having chase uniques and things like that is that they're a nice, clear, obvious target. They're like highly themed. You know exactly what they're for, where they come from, all that sort of stuff makes them a really solid chase. So I guess the shift to the rares being the chase is, while I really like that, you know, a really well-rolled rare being the best thing and beating out uniques in terms of raw power, or even now potentially in terms of utility, that shift has certainly had an impact on people's satisfaction with the chase for gear.
I mean, I've said this before, so I won't labor the point too much. I think I wouldn't be so anti the whole influence thing if it didn't just make base rares so much less interesting, so much less impactful. And that was one of the things that I always thought was really cool about Old Path of Exile, is it was theoretically possible that you could just drop the best Karui more, and you could just pick up a rare, you could identify it, and you could be like, this is a god tier item. Yeah. But with influence items,
not possible now.
It's with influence items, tier 0 Maven, double influence, like that whole, you can't just like pick up a lit rare anymore. And I think for the casual players, that's really important, because with the old system, they could edge their way into like, oh my god, I just happened to pick up what turns out to be the best wand on the server. You can't do that anymore.
But like, it's so hard to make that exciting, because like what I said, for instance, before was that the changes now are minor compared to like literally removing influences. I mean, a single influence item can give you easily like 30% more damage. How can they design something that essentially doesn't increase the power creep and increase the power of the player, while simultaneously gets people excited for the next league? Stuff like influence items at the time, to me, seemed necessary, and now like taking that away is very problematic. Because
why are we taking it away?
Well, that's kind of what you said, that it could be introducing a new set of them, right? Because they didn't get rid of Elder and Shaper, but they like slapped on more on top of it. Did you mean like just slap more?
Shift, that's I mean, like shift everything to the
power
side.
Creep again, no? Like if people prefer this new thing over this old thing, then yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a lot more powerful. Just like if you make like all these, like take all of what is there now and put it in a small little bundle of like, you can still get this stuff through div cards and through like getting the fragments to fight Shaper or Osiris or whatever. You can still get those things, but they're kind of way off to the side, so they're much more niche. And then there's this new core set of stuff that's much more available. That changes like the game and builds and how we gear our characters dramatically. And I mean, I feel like that is inevitable, right? Like that's going to happen, because when they change the end game and these current conquerors aren't a thing anymore, like these current conquerors and Cyrus aren't going to be a thing forever, right?
I mean,
it's going to be a new end game soon.
We're talking about vertical versus horizontal progression. And that's my main issue with influence items, is they're horizontal. Wait, hang on, my brain's not working.
Wait, no, the other way.
Yeah, they're vertical. They're vertical, not horizontal progression. So yeah, by introducing new influence types, adding more options is obviously making players more powerful because they have more options. But if you're keeping things on a level, then in theory, you're not trivializing your past content.
Yes.
And that's why GGG is taking the approach they're trying to do now, is because GGG could just introduce tier 20 maps, tier 25 maps, and they could keep the game challenging that way. But then all the old content becomes a joke, like Exile and Shaper, and they're trying to keep that stuff feeling impactful, which is why I'm in favor of the nerfs. But we don't fucking know what they're doing next, so I don't know.
Like the thing is, introducing more options is not necessarily power creep. I know that you keep wanting to phrase this way, but I actually don't agree.
Oh, really?
Yes, and okay, let me explain. If the option is just an alter in playstyle, yes, it could result in some power creep some places, but at the same time, you can easily rein that in. You know, a slight adjustment to that new thing that you've introduced, right? So that you could have. What I mean by that is that you are locked in by a certain subset of affixes, right? And so you'll have to make choices which will alter how your character performs. So it'll perform differently. I mean, it might just be a more nimble character, but it'll, it'll alter to your preferred play style, but it might actually not give you more power, right? You're not gonna like kill the boss faster. You're gonna do it in a different way, but not faster.
But on a character by character basis, isn't that what they did with this league? And it's pretty like with gems basically, by bringing down like the power of just more multipliers, therefore like bringing up the support gems. I feel like that's so much easier to do than with a system like that interacts with each other so freaking much, because every league they introduce, I don't know, there was a pierce item before and now there's a chain item and now it interacts with this thing before. Like it gets really out of hand really quickly. Those options.
Right, but there is a difference between introducing a slew of measured like affixes versus when shaper items and elder items were first introduced, it was gain 40% fizz. It was like gaining hatred on a single mod. There's a difference between adding a sub like that as like an affix pool versus, you know, they could have all the different iterations of they probably have at this point, but like gain certain things. If it was all 10%, you know, you would take what you would need, but it would much more closely be what's it called, balanced in comparison to a increased modifier on an item, and you would have to like go in and see, well, which is actually going to give me more power.
I know what you're trying to say, but I will also say we can get fucking ascendancies on boots. We can get +2 the idea of getting +2 level gem amulets is ridiculous. But just to go back to your previous point, the more options you have in your game, the more solutions you have to weaknesses, and by that extent, you have power creep. The more options, the more solutions you have to your weaknesses.
Yes, but this is the kind of power creep we would like to have, because this is much easier to balance.
No,
like,
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you.
I don't know. I don't think stuff like that works in PoE. Like, I don't know. Example would be something like pinpoint. They introduced pinpoint. Let's say that they introduced that on an item as like a separate influence or whatever. People just go, okay, so what's better, GMP or pinpoint? Okay, GMP is better for this build. I use GMP. Pinpoint's better for this build. I use pinpoint. It's like, how do you get people excited about something like that when in reality, people use GMP? Pinpoint's kind of dead. Like, I mean, some people use it, but you got to introduce options that then make players want to try something by making them stronger. I would, in a perfect world, that wouldn't be the case, but I just can't think of like a real life example where that would work out. And it does boil down to more options is more power.
I don't know. I think maybe I'm misunderstanding the point you're making, or I've lost the thread of the conversation to some degree, but I think there's value to introducing affixes or uniques or just content into the game that in even that current iteration of the game is not that relevant to the meta or to particular builds. Because if you build that sort of iceberg of content underneath the tip of whatever is meta and strong, in a future iteration, in a future patch, some of it might become relevant, and then that's a really cool thing for the player base to discover, that like this tool or this, you know, unique or way of playing, whatever, that was unused for 3 leagues is now suddenly actually pretty good because of this one other change made in the patch. It's, you know. Yeah,
but then what happens with it? If the entire community discovers, okay, this thing is now pretty good, like they just nerf it. So
yes, I mean, eventually the outlier,
it just becomes a problem. I don't know. It becomes a ticking time bomb. Like
the outliers in any given meta will eventually be nerfed in order to promote further change. Yeah, but like that's gonna happen whether that's gonna happen regardless, right? Like the highest performing skills in any given meta will eventually see nerfs if they're high performing for too long. That's just the nature of the development of this kind of game.
Yeah.
I mean, now they really do it like immediately. Usually things don't even last.
Okay, you can argue. Yeah, you can argue the time frame being good or bad in one direction or the other. Yeah, sure, I see that. Like, you know, should they wait a little longer to nerf things like what was really strong last league, Bladefall, Blade Blast? What would be the example from last league? Wasn't Bladefall, Blade Blast pretty powerful for like 3 leagues?
Yeah, though? Fire Burst would be like the thing.
Fire Burst, yeah, that would be the poster child.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, on a case-by-case basis, you can argue it one way or the other. I actually agree with you wholeheartedly on Fire Burst. I was pretty sad to see how shredded it got.
Hey, they only nerfed it in like 8 different directions.
Yeah. But like builds are powerful, so we should nerf them is not at a fundamental level a bad concept. It's it's about like the specifics.
The thing is, like, I'm not like arguing for or against it, because I'm just arguing for like the real life situation. Because in a perfect world, to me, adding a lot of cool, interesting stuff and then eventually getting it nerfed in a way that's sensible, that's kind of perfect to me. I get to play this thing for a league or two. I enjoy it a lot, and then it goes away and something else comes around, and then maybe eventually that thing comes back. But from what we've seen from the feedback from this league, if you take shit away, people get pretty pissed off. I don't know. So like, how can you introduce these changes that eventually you're gonna have to do something about without like getting people riled up about,
But what is it that
them?
Okay, I need you to be more specific here, Raiz. What is it that they're going to immediately have to do something about, or they will eventually have to do something about? What is it specifically that they're introducing, or that they could introduce, that would have to be handled in such a manner?
I mean, we're talking about items or even skill gems.
Harvest
like
would be an
Fire
example.
Burst, like last league,
Fire
for
Burst,
instance.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Fire Burst just got overbuffed. Then they over nerfed it.
Yeah, but
I don't.
You can say that about anything.
No, but like what? So you're saying that the only way they can ever introduce new things is going to be in a poorly balanced state? Wouldn't we want to go away from that?
No. Of course, it would be great if they would release skills that are balanced, but even if like all 19 of the gems in this league would be introduced in a way that was like super duper balanced, taking that away from players would only ever leave them dissatisfied. There's no case scenario where like they could take that away from players and they would be upset. Like, I don't know, when like anything that ever got nerfed,
taking them away.
So then you have to keep that in mind when you're introducing these skills that are very powerful. That eventually
it's a band-aid that you need
to have to cut down on it. Again, in a perfect world, they should just release perfectly balanced skills that only ever become a problem eventually. But they've never done that. Like, that's not a real life scenario.
But like the thing, okay, so this is the thing, right? They become they can become a problem if the game suddenly allows for like there's like a big new gem that comes in that like interacts with it in a bit too powerful way, and you bring it back and you keep doing that. But that's what we were talking about earlier. But
okay.
why I don't get why we why this notion that like they're always gonna take it away. But like one thing that frustrates me with PoE or with current balance is that they keep killing gems. Like they keep killing the whole playstyle. And I don't see what the reason is, because if they actually like this idea of bringing overly powerful skills that trivialize their game speaks against exactly what it is they're trying. If their new direction is to make it so that you feel that there are choices, you cannot keep introducing, like you can't like over buff stuff like Fire Burst to completely trivialize the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't think because if things are then also in a pretty well balanced state, there will always be some outliers. That is okay, and there should be things that make you feel more powerful than others. Even if they should, you cannot avoid it. It's not even a sense of whether or not they should. It's just something you can't avoid. And so you just keep like you would try and maintain a semblance of balance across all things. And then when you introduce a new well balanced skill, by virtue of being new and shiny, people will be gravitating towards it.
I want to say something which is related to this, but it's looking at a different light. And I'm curious how much of this is just a result of GGG being too precious about their marketing. Because it feels like a lot of this stuff, like the 19 skill gems, like we went through in the last podcast a list of the 19, like, okay, how many of them actually work? How many of them don't work? It often kind of feels like we get in a situation where someone at GG is like, yo, we're going to make 19 skill gems, one for each ascendancy, but at the end of the day, like 5 of them don't land. And rather than just release 14, they're like, no, we have to release all 19 because we said we we're going to do one for each ascendancy. And it kind of feels like a lot of this just comes down to being pushed against a wire, having a deadline, and being like, fuck it, ship it, boom. And where the game is at now is after years of, fuck it, ship it, boom. You know, Harvest, fuck it, ship it, boom. Influence items, fuck it, ship it, boom. And we've just had so many of these that you just get so much reckless addition that over the years you build up so much power, they're now having to be like, okay, cut it back. And I think
Tarke said that incredibly well.
I think they really just need to be much more careful and considered about what they put in. And the thing which frustrates me a little bit about it is there was a big thing recently, I think it was around Heist League, when they made a statement saying, we're going to be less ambitious and more considered with the leagues we make. And we've, I think we can all agree Expedition's been a really fun league because it wasn't too ambitious. You've got 4 really great new bosses. Logbooks are amazing content. I know some people aren't mad for it, but I've really loved this league. And it's like, yes. And then 19 skill gems. And you're like, fucking no.
Wouldn't you say the same thing about Ultimatum, though? That it wasn't overly ambitious?
I liked Ultimatum. The issue they had with Ultimatum was their balancing. And they were like, okay, we don't want to make loads of bullshit mobs, but we want to challenge players. How do we do that? Just throw 1,000 mobs at them. And then that was the problem you had with Ultimatum, because they just went, too many mobs. But,
again, in a perfect world, Nugi, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm just saying that looking back at their track record, I think what Taiki just summarized really well, that they haven't really been capable of doing that for a very long time now.
No, I agree. What Tarke said right there, I agree with completely. Like the backlog of what they've been doing, yes.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else they want to say on that topic? Otherwise, we'll move on. Ziggy, you good?
Yeah, move it on. Let's go.
So, I'm sure Raiz is a nice, calm, easy topic for you. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of a small guy called Doublelift. Slightly professional. I love Doublelift. Doublelift's great. Yeah, so Doublelift tweeted out earlier today, I love Path of Exile, but holy shit, this league is bad. If they don't revert the changes, make huge improvements to quality of life such crafting next league, the game is going to die. I've never seen a community so negative about the developer, and I browse the league sub. Upside down smiley emoji. What is your take on Doublelift's take on the current state of the game?
Doing takes on takes.
Yeah.
And mega lol.
I'll take a take on a take.
Normally, I wouldn't just be like, oh, some random person has tweeted this. But I think it's quite a big deal because he's got nearly 1 million followers on Twitter. He's one of the best League of Legends players in the world, and he's an exceptionally good PoE player. He's the rank 1 chieftain in Softcore Trade right now.
The optics aren't great.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I
read that. I'm like, these are bad optics for PoE for the wider gaming community right now, regardless of anything else. It's not a good look.
Yeah. Especially also since I'm pretty sure GGG have sponsored Doublelift to play the game as well, which is just another layer on top of the optics of everything.
I mean, that part of it is I would say a good part of it. The fact that he can, speak his mind even though he has been sponsored. I mean, I think at least there's that, if there's a silver lining. However, I do think that this is like Twitter in a nutshell. So you can be of whatever opinion you want about the league, and you not liking it is completely a valid thing. Right, so I think that's one thing. This I feel like there's a lot of hostage taking going around in people's statements. It's you either revert all you did, give me my game back, or else the game will die, or else something, and then he layers on top and give us this. I would argue that if they gave us the quality of life and the backlog of things that have been piling on, this league does not look as bad. Twitter lacks nuance, right? To me, a tweet like that looks like, well, I can either expand on my points, tell people what I actually mean, or I can have an easy to click tweet, or I can make a tweet longer.
Yeah.
PoE right now kind of requires a tweet longer if you actually want to expand on anything. Because there's too many things going right or wrong. I would say the league mechanic has so many good things actually going for it. If you look at the way they address there's no aura stacking. There's a lot of things there is not that does not suffer from the same problems that a lot of the last leagues did. The boss design is excellent. I would say that the logbooks are good. We can then argue, okay, is the reward system good enough? But then you could have also argued years back, was the reward system that they introduced since Synthesis good, right? The moving rewards away from monsters into boxes. I mean, there's so many things in PoE you can argue about, and then summing everything up as if this one league's fault, and then saying revert everything back, even though that you're trying to make strides forward in some areas, and then do everything as you did before, plus some quality of life. I
mean, how would
know,
you even look at this, like, at a revert back comment, like, just as face value? There's definitely a lot of nuance to, like, what they have done. And again, I am of the opinion that in the immediate future, this patch was negative, but it has long-term consequences that are beneficial for the game. But if you're going to say, like, revert the game, I think from GGG's point of view, they just go, yeah, but, like, you guys complained the same amount last week about how Ultimatum was terrible and how, like, Ritual was terrible. And I think I would double down in their case, like, because you can't really reason with this sort of statement.
Well, to me, the whole thing comes across as like someone who's played a lot and gone really hard on it and reached a frustration point where they needed to have a vent. Like that's what they raised to me, because he was like #1 chieftain in XP or something like that. So he's like went real hard on the game and reached that frustration point, which I can totally understand and see like people getting to. So as people chat saying, he's like clarified in follow-up comments later, because I doubt it's like a revert everything sort of situation, but more referring to specific things that, again, like Nugi said, lacks nuance there and on Twitter, because that aren't expanded upon in that tweet.
Yeah, he clarifies. Curses and Amulets feel terrible. Build diversity is extremely low because damage is nerfed so hard. T4 Ashling and Harvest both got it equals. Crafting sucks again. I'm currently #1 on softcore trade ladder on Chieftain. He's the #1 Chieftain, as in. And the game has never been this stale for me.
Oh, that's very understandable. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of it.
Fuck, man. I'd lose my mind if I was playing Chieftain, too.
I'll probably have a good time.
I don't know. I killed my first Awakener with Chieftain, and it was something else.
I will. He's playing Totems, though, isn't he? I'm pretty sure he's playing the new Totem stuff.
I think he's playing... I think he like playing Cyclone or something.
I did hear there was some very
Maybe
good...
it's Cyclone Totem.
Cyclone.
Shockwave Cyclone Chieftain is still great.
Yeah, that's good. What do you think, Octavian? You've been quite quiet on this one.
I don't know. I've been quiet because a lot of the things that I've wanted to say were covered by you folks, and I didn't really want to just parrot things. But to the last part of the point where you're talking about, the general negativity, like he's not really wrong on that. If nothing else, my personal opinions and anyone's personal opinions on the changes aside, this league has been one of the harder ones to be hooked into the community for. So I feel like I've gone to Twitter a couple times and typed out some sort of venting tweet about that fact and then deleted it a few times myself. So it's understandable. Whether you like the changes or not, it's not really been a pleasant situation to be in.
Yeah, I think it's...
I wonder what he means also by build diversity. That's like the surprising part. He's playing one character. He doesn't have any other characters in his account. How does build diversity affect him? It was like a means of giving feedback.
Well, given that he mentioned that the game feels stale, maybe he just doesn't have any other builds that he's excited about, because a lot of the ones he wanted to play don't seem to be in as good a spot as he, like how Tarke's feeling with his Trapper, where the builds that he's rerolling to are just like, oh, well, this is just not as good. I guess I'm going back to Trapper.
To be fair, I kind of get where Raiz is coming from. Because if you're the kind of person who, okay, I'm going to push ladder and be the first 100, it would kind of be like Alkaiser doing his Cyclone vibe and being like, oh, diversity is awful this patch. And it's kind of I mean...
Well, it can come down...
but
you can
if
play
that's
one build
the point...
and still complain about that because you're like, there's nothing else that's
I mean, you could have felt
dangling there
forced
enticing
into
me.
playing that build because you wanted to play something different. But yeah, that's true. That's true.
Nothing this patch is enticing me to play anything else. Like even at certain points, like now I'm starting to think, like look at a lot of different things and think, oh, that'd be really fun to play. This would be really fun to play. But earlier in the league, I was like, I don't even know what else I would play. Like I don't really. There's nothing there that's like standing out to me that's getting me excited to play things. And I think that's maybe just that whole thing where like, feeling or vibe wise, not giving things for people to get excited about, or like having a very nerf heavy. Like what we mentioned last week, a nerf heavy league means that there's less things for people to get excited about and sets a negative tone from the outset.
I mean, it's definitely the vibe I've had with my character, because it was a situation of literally the only reason I decided to reroll in the first place is people kept bitching that I was playing traps and everyone's playing traps. So I didn't even really want to reroll, but then I've struggled to find something which has excited me. So I am definitely part of that crowd. I think one thing, this is something I wanted to ask about you guys, because we're mostly positive. We may not agree with the changes, but we're agreeing with the direction. This is something I've been suffering a lot with, and I don't know if it's the same for you guys. My biggest struggle with Path of Exile, it's been like this for the last year or so, is apathy. And it's not apathy because I'm upset with the way the game is going, but it's the way the entire communication about the game is going. And it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on, you kind of end up at the same point. If you're not happy with the way the game is going, you're getting frustrated, you're getting angry, and then you're like getting into hate circles, and you're all just like a bunch of really angry people. And if you're like excited for the way the game is going, you're constantly having to deal with the anger and the frustration, so you just end up apathetic anyway. And that's kind of where I'm sort of at. I feel like the communication, regardless of where you are, like what side, what you think or something, like the communication around the game is so fucking dead at the moment. And I think the Doublelift tweet, regardless if we think it's a good tweet or a frustration or whatever, it seems like I don't know.
Okay, before we move on to the communication, if I can try, if you guys can agree or not, trying to like deconstruct a little bit, like what it is that makes people feel like there's a lack of build diversity. Okay. So what I mean by that is, so I think a lot of people are running into the problem that you specifically mentioned here, Al-Kaiser on an XP ladder push. This has now turned into basically, like more people run into this issue, and I'll like try and explain. Whenever you try to go for an XP push, it becomes very obvious what becomes the best thing to get you to that goal. Okay? The best thing is generally like some kind of explodey thing, right? It was like Impulsa, or like ED Contagion that spread everywhere, or like Gladiator because it has explosions and you can put all the dots, right? So you are immediately faced with the option of, I know the choices I have, build diversity, pushing to 100 is bad. And that is bad because there's a competitive edge that you need. Now, if you are playing on Trade League and you feel like the way to get to Awaken Orbs, Awaken Gems, and Maven requires you to take a build that goes all the way at a competitive angle without there being any leverage in the early to mid stage of PoE, you feel like there's no build diversity. I think one of the things I believe that PoE did so well in the early days is that you had some like edge, like very, very far away bosses, but you didn't really need to go there. You could MF in low tier maps and farm Calm's Heart. You could find like Wind Rippers and all that kind of thing, and you felt okay with re-rolling. Now, this has changed, especially with the top ending of how they're doing like passive points. And I think this is what a lot of people are feeling, as if they're this like, they feel like they're pushed towards going there, and experimentation is now becoming less and less as an option.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, fully agree.
Every character has to be able to boss now. And before, a lot of people just going to blast
maps. But not just boss. It is very specific bossing that is very difficult.
Yes.
And you need to get that stuff done for your Atlas to, start getting that really enjoyable feeling as well. Like,
and you need to do it on your first character as well. It's not a case of like, I'll get to that in a month. You've got to do it right at the start of the league.
So, how do you address that then? like one of the previous things that you had back in the Shaper Elder meta was that I've really liked then was you could like farm Elder Influence on lower tier maps and get like a white tier Elder and have some progression and do some kind of endgame boss without doing, you know, the big bad of Red Elder or Shaper himself. Would you want to do that with Conquerors, where you can farm lower tier Conquerors still, and you know, still get your Watchstones that way, so you can collect your Watchstones and stay in lower tier maps if your build can't progress up to higher tier maps? Do you want to make it so that you can still unlock your Atlas passives in lower tier maps, and Maven will just keep giving you lower level fights, and you can get your passives that way and stay in lower tier maps if you want? Because that does disincentivize to some degree going to higher level maps, and it removes some of the reward from those higher tier bits of content.
I mean, not really, because the higher tier content, nearly every league mechanic is balanced. I mean, Quarry exists, but like in most cases, the best shit comes from the highest tier maps. So that is the push. Like just running tier 16s is like it's the best XP, and you're getting the best eye level bases, you're getting the best influence bases, so you're getting the best items, and you know that could be where you're getting the chase item comes in. Because if you're in a situation, it's different in a trade league because you can buy shit. But like, you know, it's a situation of if you're only getting eye level 72 items drop, well, you're not going to be picking up much great shit off the floor, are you? I guess the question should be, should the power be tied to bosses in the first place? Should all the passive power all be tied to bossing?
I mean, personally, I love bosses and I love like a big emphasis on bossing. But the idea of maybe like making it so that people can continue to progress at like the lower tiers of content is maybe a nice, well, one way of approaching that. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is there.
I think I was personally, I would actually be behind that. I like the idea of doing lower tier Conquerors over and over again. I've mentioned it, I think, a few times now, where I want to be able to like test my builds against, you know, something below a T14 Conqueror boss. And yeah, I wouldn't be against players being able to progress on that tier of content. So long as you then still had stuff at the very pinnacle that had, you know, some relevance, like, you know, don't bring Uber Elder down, you know, don't bring Feared down. Those kind of like super high level aspirational boss fights, yeah, those should probably still be quite difficult. But if you want to farm T7 Conquerors or T8 Conquerors a bunch, I don't see why that would be a huge problem.
Yeah, it's like progression bossing versus make that accessible at like lower levels a bit more versus the like endgame goal bossing. It's like, yeah, like Maven doesn't necessarily have to be done. Like, yeah, you get 2 passive unlocks for your tree thing, but that can still be left as like a long-term aspirational goal. You don't have to do it to proceed. Even Cyrus to an extent, because you don't have to actually do Cyrus. Like, you can just ignore Cyrus completely and still progress fully. So
I mean, you could. There's
Conquerors.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just like Conquerors are like mandatory for your progression, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of options you could do. You could make it so that you don't get fancy craftable Watchstones unless you're doing red tier Maven content, or you don't get Maven Splinters unless you're doing red tier Maven content. So there's still like some incentive to push higher, but you could unlock all your passive points through lower tier content.
I'll get a little anecdote here from where my experience, like just from this league, because I actually think that this league has allowed me to just experiment so much more. I think there's so many builds that have potential. There's so much stuff you can do. However, this is my problem I run into. Right now, I'm sitting on E4 Conquerors, and these new builds require slightly more than I have to be able to overcome those fights, which was like the build I got there with was a very strong build. I put a lot of effort into it and it was very strong. It could deal with those. My reroll can't really. So I'm perpetually stuck having to this slightly lower content that I can't really deal with. Like, or they can't really, no, they can't really, it cannot give me what it is. I need to run the Conquerors to get my upgrades. And I could have done that at a lower tier. But I can't actually do the Conquerors right now because I'm stuck.
Yeah, you can't get the influenced bases.
Yes.
That's what you mean. Yeah. This isn't a solution to your problem, but the new vendors do help with that at least a little bit.
I have been using that.
Yeah,
yes.
You can get like high level bases
so
from
RNG.
them. No, like I said, it's not a straight solution, but it is nice.
I mean, this was my exact point with the old bleed and poison mods being gated around influence eye level 86, and I was like, well, this is ridiculous because I'm playing a poison build in SSF and I need eye level 86 influence bow to do the content, but I can't get that unless I'm doing the content, which requires me having the bow to do the content, you know. But it's fine because they deleted that mod. That was their solution. That was their workaround. just delete it. No problem anymore.
Classic.
To circle back around, one thing that I was curious to hear what your take is on the whole, like, people feeling like there's less options and it's kind of being maybe dictated somewhat by what ladder pushers or racers are doing. I kind of feel like PoE Ninja is an excellent tool, but I think PoE Ninja is a big part of the problem because it only shows people over a certain level, so then you see it and you're like, oh, this is what's good, so people are just gravitating to the same things over and over again, and then the later in the league you get, it becomes more of a problem. I've always found PoE Ninja incredibly helpful for the way that I use it, which doesn't really work anymore. So I used to always play traps, but only like 1% of the player base used to play traps before. So the way I would end every play session is I'd go on PoE Ninja and I'd look at the 1% of trappers in SF and I'd look at everyone's profile and it would be like a fun little tour. Like, oh, this is how it's working. When like 20% of the player base is doing it, it's not this nice, quick little, oh, let me just skim through this thing sort of thing. And it kind of, yeah, I don't know.
Traps are meta, Tarke.
Yeah.
You're screwed.
Yeah. I'm going to be really upset when the trap nerfs happen.
It's a great buff for hipsters though, because like
I don't think
you can play a 0.0% representation skill quite easily right now and still have a very, very powerful one. There's a ton of very powerful skills that are 0.0%, so you can be a hipster with a viable build quite easily. I mean,
because that's the thing which I find funny, just is because literally on the point is like the builds which are the best builds this league were the builds I were playing last league and being told they're shit. But now it's like, you know, like all the like my ice trap raider I was playing last league, he's like, Tarke, this is a shit fucking build. Why are you playing this? And it's like the most fucking meta thing ever. And it's like, well, you know.
Okay, well, I gotta say it just to emphasize a little bit on the Doublelift build diversity thing, okay? Because I totally get where you're coming from, and I'm sorry, I think Doublelift is one of the people that suffer from something like that, because I've been looking through his characters. He played Winter Orb at its most meta, then he's got a bunch of naked characters, then it's Stormbrand at its most meta, then it's Cyclone again, and Cyclone again, basically. So I think he basically plays Cyclone where like the meta isn't defined, and when the meta is defined, he plays like the strongest build. So then I don't know how like the build diversity stuff affects him this much, but I'm sure that he's gonna play like a build next league that's gonna like fit into this once people figure out what it's gonna be. If people do.
He'll be playing Brain Rattler, Seismic Trap, I'm telling you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yes.
Welcome to the new meta.
We're all going to be playing that next league.
Like the thing is, if you don't like the thing at the top, then I can see how the game can feel like terribly shit for you, you know? And you would resort into something like, yeah, the Cyclone. Because he has like a 95 Cycloner, and he has a level 100 Cycloner, and now he leveled another one to 100. And from what I can see, it's basically on the leagues that like introduced Maven or the meta wasn't particularly defined. So yeah, for those people, I think stuff like this sucks. And what also extra sucks is that those builds don't even get nerfed like in the same way that the low tier stuff gets nerfed. I feel like builds like Cyclone get affected by nerfs like this a lot less than something that was already like struggling to even get above the water. But as people continue to like figure this stuff out, hopefully there's going to be a little bit more diversity, even though it's going to be definitely a lot less than previous league.
One thing I wonder, and I'm curious if it's a similar thing now that I think about it, because that reminded me. So I raced with Vol Molten Shell back in like Perendus League when Vol Molten Shell was the shit. And that ruined the game for probably about a year for me. Like legitimately nothing felt good for about a year. It took me a really long time to get over that. And I wonder if like this change is just forcing that on a lot of players. Maybe. And if people are going through a similar sort of thing.
I feel like Pathfinder's ruining me for playing other builds.
Probably, yeah.
Situation, meta. Like,
I had that with Deadeye. a long time ago when Deadeye was like doing all the stuff and nothing else. I played like Deadeye for 2 years straight. It was awful.
One of my highest level characters for a while was a Deadeye called Deadeye Does It All. Because back in the time, just every build was Deadeye.
I wonder.
It's nice to see.
Oh, go on.
Just it's nice to see Spectral Shield Throw so popular. I don't think it stands out like that much, but simultaneously it's nice. I know that Octavian hates it. I've always liked this too. And like the thing is too that even though it's 17% from what I can see on Softcore Expedition, it's like 17% Spectral Shield Throw is a lot better than 60% Blade Blast.
I feel like a fucking crazy person. How are so many people enjoying Spectral Shield Throw? How?
It
feels so bad to use.
It's all about power.
I mean, the thing which is cool about Spectral Shield Throw, and it's the same thing that I like about Helix, is there's lots of different ways to build it. Because the 17% isn't really fair, because it's like there are people doing bleed, there are people doing impale, there's people doing cold conversion, there's people doing poison. Like, if you were to actually break it down to all the different build types, it'd probably be like 4%, 5%, 6%, you know.
I wonder if there's any absolute chads doing fire conversion chieftain shield throw.
Yeah.
Fire conversion? Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I want that to be a thing. I'm gonna look.
It's totally a thing.
There's still a guy playing Bladefall Blade Blast Chieftain at like 94 or something.
Oh god, the cast speed must feel terrible.
That's I reckon people are like, it's really cool that people are like playing Spectral Shield Throw and playing and enjoying it so much. And I think like the fact that it encourages you, well, for a lot of people to build Gladiator and like play around with like max block and feel really good, like enjoy that a lot. But also it's a skill that encourages you to like get as higher armor shield as possible. So people are also just kind of like implicitly actually getting some defenses and really enjoying that. On softcore, I'm seeing that a lot.
Building defenses.
It's basically tricked them into building defenses, and it's kind of working out great. And people are, I think, having a lot more fun because of that. So,
yeah, but isn't that like literally the opposite of what they wanted? Like what they accomplished with the mana changes, for instance, where you're building defense and offense at the same time? That's too powerful. Doesn't that mean that Spectral Shield Throw is going bye-bye?
I wanted to ask you, are you guys expecting it to get nerfed next league?
Well, think about this, right? You throw away your shield, so it shouldn't protect you. So I think that's how it works. Spectral Shield Throw gives you a debuff that makes it so your armor and your shield doesn't affect your character, nor does your block. Because you can't defend yourself if you throw away your shield. Think about it. That's how they're going to nerf it.
I like that.
The thing, what you said, Tarke, is I feel like that very much holds true. That like the 17% is so spread out. And then I really wonder if GGG looking at this stuff, they're like, yeah, you know, this is peak build diversity. Because if we do count the Spectral Shield Throw being like multiples of like 4, then it's Raiz Spectre 11, Forbidden Rite 7, Toxic Rain 5, and then it's basically all of the same numbers for like Cyclone, Caustic Arrow, Skeleton, Spark, Elemental Hit, Lightning Strike, Shield Crush, Carrying Golem, that's probably a part of something else. Ice Trap, Exsanguinate. Like, this is peak build diversity. I don't know.
And also, out of that 17%, if you click on it, what's the Ascendancy spread like on it? Of just the shield people?
Quite frankly, I'm not sure how to check it.
You could make the argument that Blade
you can just click it. It's 80%
Gladiator.
It's 80% Gladiator. 19% Raider.
My boy Captain Lance, he's been getting a lot of shout-outs. I mentioned him on the last podcast. He did a fucking Trickster energy shield, Sexual Shield Thrower. He was like, it's not the best. But I was like, I respect. You know, I'm like, I give you props for doing it.
I think this number is going to shift. I think more people are going to start playing Raider once the cold conversion memes get brought up.
I mean, there's been some guides that have been popping off with that one. Yeah.
If anything, remember when Chieftain actually became even a thing on softcore because of explodey stuff? Yep. You can stay. I mean, if you can get your hands on the gloves and you go any like shield skill and you just scale AoE and you fully convert and you go fist damage and AoE scaling, you will get like you can literally just shield charge full maps and everything will explode.
If you want a shield scaling build that clears with shield charge and has a bit more single target potential, you could even go like a General Scry build with, you know, a pseudo 5 or 6 link for your own shield charge and clear maps with that, and then do single target with G-Cry. That's one of the builds I was planning on playing this league.
I haven't seen people do like a general's cry build where I went, I really like the look of that. Usually the things that I did like the look of, I would go, I really like that, and then I could never like get it to work the way I would want it to.
I mean,
it's a cool concept though. I hope people have a lot of success with Battle Mage's Cry. That's a cool one too.
I guess the real question is, oh no, go on, Niggy.
Oh, this is just a quick build question. Can you put a mace on with explode, or is that with this weapon? Does that specify with this weapon? The exploding mace?
I'm pretty sure you can use exploding mace.
Oh, you mean the synthesis one? I think it works.
No. Just
Shaper
like
mod.
the Shaper one.
Oh,
I'll check.
It's global, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're global.
Chat saying it's global.
Enemies killed with attack or spell hits explode.
Yeah, because it works with spells.
Okay. Well, Chieftain's pretty good then.
Good thing you can't use that with explosive concoction and offhand, otherwise that skill would be busted. Am I right, guys? Good thing they killed that interaction. I'm never going to forgive them for that one.
It's the whole podcast. That's what it's all been about the whole time.
But I wanted to ask the question though, because we've kind of flirted around a bit with like other people's takes. Do you guys feel limited in your build choices right now?
I feel the freest ever for all the wrong reasons.
Because you haven't left Act 10?
No, excuse you. Listen, I made it a point because this turned from a joke from my chat into people genuinely thinking that like I haven't done anything this league. Okay, so I made it a point to do some stuff even beyond what I did before. And no, the reason is because like they kind of destroyed two of the playstyles that I really enjoyed, right? So now I'm fishing. I'm constantly fishing and I'm constantly thinking about different stuff. No, which is very fun, like short term. I don't know how long I can last in the world of rerolls, though. We'll see.
I mean,
I am itching, however.
That's literally where I am right now, trying to work out what I do in a land where traps are no longer cool, you know.
Bitch, you projected big time. You were talking about like the Raiz QT something, okay? I don't have a problem with how my starter build was or anything like that. That was incredible projection in your video, Tarke. I took huge offense to that.
I love you, Raiz.
I feel a little more limited in that some of the builds that I'm very familiar with got hit fairly hard, like Archmage as an archetype and stuff. So I have to explore avenues that I'm less familiar with. That said, I've played a lot of trappers, so that's been very successful. But like, there are builds that I've been looking into in theory crafting that are things that I haven't played much before, but they look perfectly viable on paper. I just need to get the stuff together. The limitations I feel are more from the fact that the league that I'm in is even more dead than usual. So it's been really hard to get some of the stuff that I want in order to actually put the builds together. But I say that in a podcast full of folks who play solo self-found, so I don't expect to get much in the way of sympathy there.
I mean, you've got Mr. Mirror Boy.
I think when you're playing like solo self-found, you have a certain level of expectations, but then when you go into a trade league, you have different expectations. You're in hardcore trade where you expect to be able to get some things, and yet it's much closer to solo self-found than you might be comfortable with.
So what is the current state of hardcore trade at the moment?
I mean, it feels like we're a month and a half into the league already, as far as the player base is concerned. I have been able to make pretty good gear for my trapper because it hasn't required anything too crazy specific aside from heist bases that nobody else cares about, so I can get them pretty easily because they stay listed for a while. But yeah, stuff that I want to grab for like some future builds, like I want to do some weird funky stuff with certain helm enchants or some uniques that are very rare and stuff, and yeah, that's been hard to acquire.
I do wonder, however, like what percentage by comparison of like the hardcore players quit versus the softcore players quitting. If it was like 30% of each from this league quit, or if it's a matter of like, it was 80%.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's never been extremely populated, you know.
Yeah.
The last few leagues that I've been playing it, so it's not like we went from a booming populace to nothing at all. We went from, you know, a small town to now a couple people moved away.
And those dusty one street sort of things. Entire population of the town is in the one pub.
A few takes I have seen, which might be kind of interesting, is some of my patrons have said this to me, but I saw this on Reddit, so it's probably not true. But it was a few people kind of saying how that was a joke. They've become like over the last like few years of Pee-wee and how much more powerful their characters could be. They've been playing more SSF and more hardcore, but with these changes, they felt like they've had to go back to softcore trade. And I wonder how much of a shift that would have as well when it comes to the hardcore trade league. Is people who are like so freaked out by these changes that they're like, ooh, I can't be messed around in SSF or hardcore anymore. I'm going to go back to softcore trade.
I mean, I think you would feel that. Like, the thing is, if it's like 50% of softcore and hardcore players quit, then like hardcore trade goes from 10 players to 5 players. You're going to feel that a lot more than like softcore growing from 40,000 players to now 20,000 players. So I feel like it's very difficult to quantify those numbers.
True.
I haven't really like noticed like a big change in like it has economic impacts, the like player drop off and reduced player counts in trade, but I don't really like notice that much the like difference on trade compared to what you would in hardcore. That's for sure. I don't know. I'm sure some people would disagree. Some people would be like, "Oh, I can't do things," but I don't know. I have the same amount of 20 people not responding to me that I always have when I try to buy something.
Hey,
no,
actually, that is an.
I still don't want to go to softcore trade. No, it might get better.
I did have a conversation in my chat today about that, like how the player factor, the like human factor, is a huge issue for like why the trading system doesn't work, because it's people like not responding and whatnot. And I feel like when it comes to hardcore, people are always. It was much tighter community, therefore there were higher ramifications if you were a shit trader. Do you feel like people are trading better now as individuals, or maybe it's worse because people are just frustrated?
People always respond on hardcore, Octavian?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know. I get maybe like one whisper a day that doesn't get responded to.
You get one whisper a day. That's a lot.
One whisper that I send that doesn't get responded to. I just ignore every single whisper that comes my way because I am above all of them. Jokes. But no, it's been about the same in that regard. I think Raiz was directing that at you, Ziggy, though. Like whether you have noticed a increase in how many whispers get responded to.
Whether there's been an improvement, only in my personal changes of behavior. So tricks like live searching to buy stuff instead of going through the pre-existing listings, because live searches will nearly always respond unless someone else snipes it because you're trying to go for super low ball stuff, or searching by time listed so that you can like find something that was listed 2 minutes ago.
But what about like, do the people live responding, do they just respond quickly, but they respond with actually the items 10 chaos more now, or do they like actually respond with a trade?
No, as I said, as long as you're not trying to intentionally like snipe things on live search that are like obviously being like underpriced, someone dumped it in their 5C tab and shit like that. If you're just trying to buy things for like an appropriate price using live search, it's a lot faster. A good example is like logbooks. If you try and buy logbooks that are listed on trade, you'll message 20 people and not get a response. But if you just live search, so at 35 chaos, for example, if you just live search 35 chaos logbooks, you'll pick them up no problems within a minute. So you search the same price.
So when you say live search, how does that trade go through? So how do you do that specifically?
I just put in whatever trade brackets I want. So let's say I want to buy logbooks with certain roles below 40 chaos. I just put that in. Yeah. And then I just
so anyone like at any point anyone posts one.
Yeah. So and because that's like a pretty broad range, it's like I wait
so it's like
30 seconds.
Oh, right. I just wanted to make sure that's what you meant.
And then just goes bloop and I just buy one that gets listed.
You guys don't have to go into this if you don't feel comfortable to.
He hasn't traded in a while, forgot.
No, I just wanted to like just be clear on like what we're talking about here, whether or not like
what is trade?
No, I don't trade. I don't trade. I have whooped a lot. I made a lot of bank whooping.
He knows about the whoops, guys. I know about the whoops. Trust me, whooping like big bags of sand. I know what a whoop feels like. Yep.
That's the big problem with like people who do think that like the whooping, and trading's been around a lot longer for some of us than SSF. So by default, the people who have been around for a long time have whooped more than they have SSF.
All right, Grandpa.
More of a booth now than a whoop.
Listen, I was fishing for the grandpa. Okay. I take pride in it.
I wanna ask this question. You guys don't have to answer it, but I'm curious because we can talk about like player counts and metrics, and I've seen a lot of people saying that like viewership numbers are down. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but has your viewership have you noticed it changing now compared to last league? For me, my YouTube viewership is pretty much the same. I haven't noticed like a drop or anything.
Roughly the same, a little bit higher, which I think I can attribute to actually bothering to put out YouTube content consistently.
I never kept track of, to the point where usually there would be too many people on the stream early on in the league, and I would stop streaming because it wouldn't be fun with too many people. So it's hard for me to tell.
Peppy hands.
Yep.
Too many people.
Too many people.
Suffering
too many
from
rhubarbs,
success.
dude. No, you don't feel so like you get past a certain point, especially with PoE's new stuff, and like your core community kind of gets like phased out by all these new people coming in, and it like the entire dynamic around the stream becomes very different, and in a lot of ways it would become less fun to the point of not feeling right to stream. Yeah, too many rippers.
Exactly.
I think like peak viewer counts are lower than like a good chunk lower than previous like league launches, which is like to be expected. But I've had a really like pleasant experience out of this. Obviously, I'm doing things a bit different because I'm streaming 24/7. But I've noticed that like it's a kind of like a slower growth sort of viewer base right now, and the people that are coming in and joining in are really like pleasant, and I'm getting a lot more like pleasant stuff, despite the like really big kind of like negative tone right now for PoE. I'm still getting like a lot more kind of pleasant people pleasantly integrating in. Like what Raiz said, when you get a big influx of like a big viewer spike, it dilutes your community culture on your stream. Whereas
everybody has
that's not happening so much now.
Everybody has like a different threshold for something like that. Some people get there at like insane amounts. Some people get bothered really quickly, you know? That's why streamers create like alt accounts and all this stuff. Just makes sense.
I felt in the beginning of the league, the community was definitely in a different place. I think for me myself personally, trying to just keep try and stay as close to what I feel is core to my own enjoyment, and to share that with people and not get blindsided by the most current Reddit thread, and just allowing people to either be happy or unhappy, and just saying it's fine to be either way, but we're just having fun in the game right now, has been, I would say it's really been helpful to my stream.
Yeah.
I get stun-locked all the time. I don't get frustrated about people like saying negative things about the game or anything like that. I just get stun-locked about people when they spread like misinformation and do disingenuous threads and stuff like that. That really gets me. I think it's totally fine to criticize the game. I mean, fuck, like that's what I do like for so many years. I'm known as like the whiny bitch boy who constantly complains about PoE. Well, now suddenly I'm a shill because I like some of the changes, you know. But yeah, it's like that sort of stuff that really drives me up a wall. But I'm trying to take that advice, Nugi. You know, I'm trying to do better.
So one of the things that taught me how to deal with this better was actually Asmongold. Even though one of Asmongold's takes stunned me the other day, but it's this like figuring out when a conversation is over and ending it. And I've gotten a lot better at that. Like taking the conversation is fine, making your points, making sure that like if the other party being in chat or whatever has made their point, just making it clear you had your point, I made my point, okay, discussion has been concluded, and just ending it, because there comes a point where there's just not anything else that kind of informs the conversation, and at that point you should just start
looping.
Yeah,
no one's really going to convince the other person to change their mind in many situations.
Fortunately, that's not a problem we ever run into on this podcast. We've never once repeated ourselves.
I feel like we've gotten better.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah. One thing I will say on that, to get your back a little bit, Raiz, the main thing which has annoyed me the most about all of this is I get disappointed when I open Reddit. I get disappointed when I open Reddit and I'll see like one of our names in the comments when we have nothing to do with the thread, and I know the take is something that one of us wouldn't agree with or say with, because like I talk to you guys like every other week or whatever about PvE, and that's the thing that I find very frustrating. Like one of the things go on.
For me specifically, it's like the fact that people thought that something was clipped on my stream, or was a guy who like admits he loves drama, posts 44 times a day, and then he like put a video together of me to specifically like put something out of context. And now like people are going with that take, and I see it nonstop everywhere, even on this Doublelift thread. It's just like, dude, like that stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's fucking hard to deal with. I'll be honest. I've never been in that situation where it's like, yeah.
You guys should try streaming 24/7. You don't have any time to read Reddit or read the comments looking for your name. That's great.
Easy, dude.
Easy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
say whatever you want about me on Reddit. I don't have time to read it.
Oh.
The thing is, I like listening to it because I like some of the things that people do. I like the feedback on Flash. I like this stuff. I like hearing people criticize shit that I either agree or disagree with. Even on the podcast, like a big part of the reason why I'm here is because I enjoy the way that you guys see the game. And even though I don't always agree, I like that perspective. I like reading it. A lot of people say just don't look at Reddit. It's just full of hatred and circle jerk. I don't think that's the case like most of the time, but some of the time it is the case, and it gets a little bit out of hand. So like just closing it, that doesn't really accomplish my goal because I want to see this stuff. It's interesting to me.
I get you. Yeah, it's cool to have the disagreements and see some different opinions and get some like vibes from different groups of people as well.
And I mean, it's useful as someone who creates content for the game to have an idea of how the community feels about the game. Like, wouldn't you want to know how the broader community feels so that you can, have informed opinions and
Reddit
have context.
Community. It's just one small.
This is true. There is a lot more than just the Path subreddit, but like it's a large part of the discussions that go on, as evidenced by the fact that it gets referenced in most of the conversations on these kinds of broader topics. Whether it's referenced derogatorily or positively, it's referenced. It's part of the conversation.
Yeah, whether Reddit's 1% or 50% of players, it sets the tone for the conversation for a lot of anyone who's like ingrained in the community.
I mean, and it's also the thing of, even if you're someone, like, even if Raiz was to say today, I'm never opening the PvE subreddit again, the fuck is he meant to do when GGG only communicates on the PvE subreddit? Like, you can't even be like, because I go through phases of like, I'm not going to deal with the PvE subreddit, but then I can't do my job because I need to know what GGG's saying, especially when it comes to like organizing dev episodes and stuff. I can't be like, right, time to write Baeclast topics without using the platform where all the, it's like, I do find that kind of funny, some of the things that I get on that side of things. It's kind of like, Tarke, you're the only person with access to GGG. Also, fuck you, Tarke, we don't want you on Reddit. It's like, well, I mean, if you want me to give your takes to the GGG, then I need to use the Reddit to do the thing. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, people have a very skewed perspective as to like what the function of a lot of us are. Like, again, on the Doublelift thread, like one of the most upvoted things was how he posted like, I hate that Raiz gets access to like early Path of Exile.
You've never played fucking Alpha feedback. In your life. Yeah.
I fucking never did that, but like people are convinced of stuff like that, and it's like, how do you say that? Have this conversation. You say no, they go, you're defensive. You say, like, like what can you say when somebody's already?
I can say with 100% certainty, as the only person on Spotify who actually ever does bother doing any testing on Alpha, these lazy pricks don't sit on Alpha fucking taking notes. They're not fucking there.
It's even worse. Like, anytime we had any like dev talk or anything, I caused so much trouble last time because I said like, no, I don't want anything. I don't want to pre-record. Like, don't tell me shit. I actively avoided, and yet like I'm pinpointed as the guy who somehow like does this stuff. Like, what the fuck, man? Like, I had to argue with GGG to not tell me shit. I don't know.
That is actually true, and it is quite annoying. So when we do like announcement Baeclast as part of the GGG thing, me and Ziggy are the only people who actually know what's going on. because the other three are like, no, we don't want our reaction to be spoiled.
For the record, by the way, well, I don't know about you, Tarke, but I don't help design, balance test, bug fix the leaks, okay? Because this keeps coming up. It's like Ziggy's not doing a good enough job of like finding this thing. Why didn't he give feedback?
Well, maybe you should start, Ziggy. You're not doing a good enough job here, buddy.
Those are not my job. I don't do those things. Sometimes I have like initial reactions that Bex hears. That's about the extent of it. I doubt that's, considering that's like 3 days before the league announcement, I doubt there's really much time to change things based on those reactions. But
the worst thing about all of that...
Don't do any of those things, okay?
The worst thing about all of that is, so Ziggy gets the stuff 3 days before because they trust Ziggy. They trust me, but not as much as Ziggy. So like, if we have an interview with Chris, I get it like the day before. So I've only got a day to prepare my notes. So yeah, it is your fault, Ziggy. That's an extra 2 days of development. They could have changed it so that when I saw it, I saw the improved version to give notes on the improved version. God, Ziggy.
You guys have any suggestions for coding courses or something I can take so I can help design the game better?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if you guys saw it. The stuff that I've been doing, just messing around with basic game dev and trying to learn how to do 3D art. That's because I was really disappointed with my performance on Ultimatum League, that I just thought I need to up my game on my programming, you know. That whole server thing, that was my bad. I pressed enter at the wrong time, then like the queues didn't work. Yeah.
Unlucky.
Yeah. I think that's basically the podcast then, isn't it?
I'm glad we could hopefully clear up some misconceptions about the streamer's role at Grinding Gear Games Company. This is good. None of us are actually employees.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be fully cleared up though, Ziggy. You'll never escape the occasional comment. You know, I've seen people unironically claiming like, you know, Ziggy's on the payroll, or Raiz is taking this sort of bribe to keep things quiet, or streamer RNG is real and they're dropping better loot. Yeah.
When will I start getting my check? Because that's the one thing.
No.
I'm waiting for mine still. It hasn't cleared yet.
Yeah, same. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Hold your breath.
It was Chris that gave you that Fallout chair, wasn't it, Ziggy?
That was Bethesda, obviously.
Oh, okay.
Wait, Chris runs Bethesda?
Yeah.
Wow. He's a busy man.
That's where all the supporter pack money goes, don't you know?
Well, they need them, I guess.
Owning Bethesda.
Good one, Nugi. Damn.
Missed it. Pip.
So yeah, that's the podcast, right? Yeah.
Podcast was good. It was fun.
Does anyone have anything else they want to say?
I'm excited for this thing with Chris we're doing later in the week. When's that?
That should be it. GGG is going to post the details on it, so keep an eye out for that. But it should be Wednesday, normal time, Thursday in upside down time.
I think we're not spoiling what it's about yet, but it's going to be very spicy. I suspect. Yeah, it's going to be very spicy.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
We're talking about the Bethesda deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're going into the nitty gritty of Chris Wilson's development of Fallout 76. Basically.
Yeah.
That's a cute papa. Hi, Papa.
It's Oliver.
Hi, Oliver. Octavian and Oliver.
He's a good boy.
So that's the podcast, right?
Yeah. That's going in the YouTube video.